The return of the UFC going back to Jacksonville with a giant featherweight main event. Josh Emmett taking on Ilia Topuria. All kinds of action coming up from Florida. You're not going to want to miss any of it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. And just like that, we are back with Fight Night Picks coming on the heels of UFC Vegas 75. As always, one half of your host duo, Craig Allen. Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, as always, respective socials, Matt Allen FNP. And Matt, we had a pretty darn good showing, all things considered, with the action that took place between Vettori and Cannonier. But when you move it forward, I mean, this is the fifth big ABC card that the UFC's put on. The first one back on Fight Island, you had Max Holloway taking on Calvin Kattar in an all-time classic for Holloway. And if you look at it, I mean, UFC dating back to UFC 249, that was Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje, a residency in 2020 of 3 straight cards. This will be the 6th Jacksonville card, and Dana White's kind of gone back, given back to the ViStar Veterans Memorial Arena and the fans in Northern Florida. And when you look at this card overall, 14 total fights, a few debuts are peppered in there, but overall, you look at the top half of this card, and it does have some of those big fight feels. So I know the fans kind of get a mix of everything on this one, but I'm very amped up about these fights.
We're in for an insane main event. Ilia Topuria versus Josh Emmett is a very different kind of main event than the one we just had last weekend, right? For Vettori and Cannonier, that was kind of their last chance to maintain themselves in the elite of the division, whereas for Josh Emmett, luckily, you hate to say it's a no-lose fight, but for Josh Emmett, even if he loses, I could see him being in the same position, right? Fighting guys on their way up. But for Ilia Topuria, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. If he beats Josh Emmett, he puts himself firmly into that top 5 of the division, and we all know what happens from that point on. You either get a title shot, or you're one fight away from a title shot, so this is a huge opportunity for Topuria.
I mean, Josh Emmett, he is 38 years old coming into this matchup, taking on the undefeated Ilia Topuria. You look at it in terms of ranked fighters, there are 7 for the second times out. You have 5 different fighters making their second time out into the UFC. And if you look at it for debuts, Matt, I know a lot of people, they're going to be very, very excited about the fact that 7-1 Fury FC flyweight champ Joshua Van steps in on short notice against Mr. Zhalgas Zhumagulov. We also have Chepe Mariscal making his debut. Austen Lane taking on Justin Tafa, another debut. So a lot of fights to really look forward to. You know the drill by now. Question Mark Kicks. It's 2 hours live before the prelims on Saturday, before the action. You get those final picks and previews. And listen, you get the chance to look back throughout the week of the MMA. So overall, a big time card, 14 total fights, a ton of action. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Back a few years ago, we had to start every single Fight Night Picks flyweight video off by saying flyweight never died, but in 2023, that division is popping, and coming up this weekend, a pair of big-time prospects meet in the center of the big cage in Jacksonville. We have Japan's Tatsuro Taira taking on Kleydson Rodrigues, and when you consider it for both of these guys, they get it done in very different ways. Rodrigues very much is that big-time flashy striker, debuted out of Team Nogueira, you know, the brothers. I mean, former UFC champ.
Wait, you mean from the Expendables 1?
1, yeah, and I mean, Expendables 4 is coming up. Maybe they make cameos. But if you look at it for Rodrigues, actually training for this fight out of Shoot the Box Diego Lima, you're going to see him with some of those big-time fighters, Alan Nascimento. What about Elvis Brenner? Elvis Brenner, who's got a fight coming up July 1st against Guram Kutateladze. That's a real thing that's actually happening, as well as Charles Oliveira. But for Rodrigues, he was a very, very hyped-up prospect coming on to Dana White's Contender Series, passed that test with flying colors, made his UFC debut, lost controversially to CJ Vergara. But for Rodrigues, his last time out against one Shannon Ross over in enemy territory over in Australia. Rodrigues showed up to show out, and he absolutely beat the brakes off Shannon Ross, utilizing knees and hooks to get that first round finish inside of a minute. So Rodrigues looking to capitalize on that, take on Tatsuro Taira, who's already 3-0 in the UFC. Looked amazing in all of those fights. If you go back and you just look at the result in this last fight against Jesus Aguilar, an early stage goatee for a young man. That's always a fashion choice, I guess, if you want to consider facial hair fashion. But Taira gets blitzed by a leg kick, gets kind of caught in a guillotine for about 3 minutes, but ends up still getting the first round submission win. I don't understand it because if you look at it for Taira, 3 fights in the UFC, either kicking off the prelims or the second fight on the prelims in all of those fights, and now he kicks off another prelim card. I don't know what this guy needs to do to impress to get on the main card of UFC fight.
He has been an extremely active prospect during his tenure with the UFC. He's not a guy you've got to wait 18 months in between every performance, and he has looked quite impressive. I know you bring up some of the holes in his game, but he's 23 years old. He should be getting better as it goes on. But for Taira, I think his progress is going to be tied to fighters like, and not specifically, but think of guys like Pat Sabatini, guys who, when they are able to initiate their one big strength, which is the offensive wrestling, the top position, the submission game with their ground and pound, they look like world beaters. But for Taira, it will be a matter of what else is he going to start bringing to the game, because his striking is somewhat rudimentary. Like, we've been talking about his wrestling since before he ever came to the UFC. That's how talented and how physically strong of a wrestler he is. But for Rodrigues, this is what I'll be curious with. No doubt he's the more devastating striker in this matchup. You bring up the knees to the body. The kicks, I think, will be very important too to maintain some of that distance. But I'll be curious to see if he can threaten with some submissions while Taira goes for some of those takedown attempts, because if Rodrigues can make it uncomfortable for Tatsuro when he goes for those takedowns, I think it will at least slow him down a bit, because that's the one thing you have to watch out for when you fight a guy like Tatsuro. Not the first takedown. If he can get the second, the third, and the fourth, it really starts to gain a momentum as the fight continues.
When you look at both of these guys and the way that they fight, for Taira, he will throw a leg kick. He throws a lot of straight shots. I was interested to see over on Taira's Instagram, and I'll reference it a little bit later on this card. It wasn't Taira's Instagram. It was Chepe Mariscal's Instagram. The fact that Taira was over there a few months ago training at Elevation in Colorado, and Taira's home base is, and I want to make sure that I get this one right, the Palestra Okinawa. That's been his home gym for a really long time. But Taira getting ready for this fight, I watched an interview that was done by Chihiro Suzuki, and in that one, it's kind of like a day in the life of, or following Suzuki's career, because he's got a fight coming up in a couple of weeks against Kleber Kuike Erbs with Ryzen for the title. So Austen to see Taira training with a fellow young, up-and-coming Japanese prospect in Suzuki, and both those guys kind of feeding off of that energy. Suzuki's one of those guys that you definitely have to watch. So if you look at it for Taira, we were a little bit down when he came into the UFC, and it's hard to kind of pick it at an uber prospect like Taira. He was undefeated as an amateur, 9-0. He's already 13-0 as a pro. He's never tasted defeat, but he liked to strike with his head kind of up, his hands kind of either out. He block punches with his hands, or he'd bring him in kind of close to his chin, and he'd move around a little bit, but he'd get hit a lot. But if you look at it for Taira, a lot of takedowns, but they're not the traditional takedowns that you usually see in men's flyweight MMA. You don't see a lot of freestyle takedowns. You see a lot of body locks, body weight takedowns, and trips as well, but it's worked for him all this way. We'll see if it works out against a guy like Rodrigues, who struggled a little bit in the grappling against CJ Vergara, but again, I thought that Rodrigues had won out in those situations, and going back and watching the tape, a lot of the spin kicks, a lot of the body shots for Rodrigues, which all of a sudden, they don't account for anything with MMA judges. So we'll see how this one plays out, because you have a very, very durable young Brazilian prospect taking on the uber-talented Japanese prospect in Taira, and for Rodrigues, a little bit similar to what we saw to Phil Rowe when he took on Nico Price. Again, parallels that are on this card. Rowe should have got a performance bonus for the big comeback that he had against Price. Rodrigues, 59-second knockout against Shannon Ross, but as you'll see on screen, 127 for Rodrigues. So we'll see how the weigh-in kind of works out for both of these guys. But again, this is a big-time fight between a couple of really talented prospects.
And it's nice to see one of these prospect versus prospect fights, because I don't think either guy's going to lose too much shine if they do get a loss from this, but the winner is going to gain quite a bit. The last thing I want to say about Tatsuro is I worry a little bit that he could be Alec Manoaing himself in this regard. He's had a lot of success early on, and he has been able to get away with some mistakes like you bring up in the striking defense, and I do worry about that, hey, what if at some point it all kind of comes crashing down at the same point? I still do think his wrestling is going to be able to get him over a lot of those hurdles, though, even if he is getting in danger early.
And that kind of is the thing. You go back and you watch Taira against Candelario, he gets hit, but he also drops Candelario in the second round. Aguilar gives him trouble. If you even go back to Taira's last fight before he came into the UFC against Muyad, he has good kicks, good knees in the clinch, but he also gets hit by a lot of hooks at range before he ends up wrapping it up and getting the finish. So a lot of high-level opposition that Taira fought as a young man. Strawweight, flyweight, bantamweight when he was a former Shuto flyweight champ. Rodrigues was a former Jungle Fights flyweight champ. If you look at the odds, you do have a juiced up favorite in Tatsuro Taira. We have a look at the Topology votes to try and get a gauge on what the fans are thinking. I feel like they're overwhelmingly going to go with Taira in the matchup. I'm going to say over under 90% Taira here.
I'll say under 90, but it'll still be a big favorite.
It is 696 total votes, 95% Taira, 71% by submission. For the 5% that have Rodrigues, you have 39% by decision, 42% by knockout. So Matt, does the fan vote sway you? What do you make of the pick on this one?
I think Rodrigues can have a lot of success in this fight, but I just worry about for how long can he sustain some of that success, because even if he is getting off some good strikes, unless he's really significantly hurting a guy like Tatsuro, I do think Tatsuro has a good enough gas tank to maintain himself. Even if he's not getting some of those early takedown attempts in that first round, he's got a very high gas tank, a very high motor to him. So I'm going to go with Tatsuro, but I don't agree with the odds. I would put him at like a minus 175 just because I do think the wrestling is going to be good enough to just dictate where this fight does take place, but I think it's a really fun fight. Like I said, two really high-level prospects, so hopefully the loser doesn't lose too much shine on this one.
Well, and that's it. Rodrigues, one of those guys, always going for the action, always being very, very aggressive. You look at the scorecards when he did fight Vergara, the MMA decisions, 11 29-28s for Rodrigues. You had 3 28-28s and 1 29-28 for Vergara. Vergara ends up getting the win. A little bit of a controversy there, like Bukauskas Paunga last weekend.
That was close.
But if you do look at it for Kleydson Rodrigues, the Dana White thing, so talented, so well-rounded, so aggressive. This kid is 25 years old. He's got nothing but time. I love this kid. Adopt him. Adopt a 25-year-old Dana White. Matt, I do have Tatsuro Taira in the matchup. I think that overall the grappling can be a big difference maker, but man, he could sit on the outside, and I know he's undefeated, and he's looked very good, but minus 400 is fucked. It's absolutely fucked when you're taking on a guy like Kleydson Rodrigues. This should be an amazing fight. Both of us going with Japan's Tatsuro Taira, but a strong gust of wind would have me picking Brazil's Kleydson Rodrigues. Make sure you check in with question mark kicks 2 hours before the prelims on Saturday for those final picks and predictions. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Well-rounded featherweights meeting up in Jacksonville. Coming up this weekend, you have Jack Jenkins, and he's going to look to go 2-0 in America, taking on the former LFA staple. It is pretty boy Jamall Emmers. And Matt, when you do consider both these fighters, Jack Jenkins on such an impressive win streak. He was so dominant over with Eternal when he was fighting there. Gets a win on Contender Series, gets that UFC debut win at home. His last time out against, what's out of my hands? I'm shameless, Don Shainis, and in that one, Jenkins was really able to stifle any offense out of Shainis, utilizing really good boxing combos. We know how good the leg kick is of Jack Jenkins. I mean, if you do consider it, just a few fights ago, right before Contender Series, when he was taking on Jason Petropoulos, he breaks his leg with a leg kick, so that was awesome to see, or disgusting to see. It depends on how you view MMA and leg kicks, but if you look at it for Jenkins, it really is a lot of bobbing and weaving and throwing those combos, picking in his body shots and working in his wrestling. We saw a lot of takedowns when Jenkins was on Dana White's Contender Series, to the fact where Dana was really critical of it, and it didn't make a ton of sense to me. But Jenkins' last time out against Shainis looked amazing. Now, all of those skills being transferable against a guy like Jamall Emmers, it might be a little difficult because Emmers has exceptional takedown defense. He's been favored in all of his UFC fights except for his last fight against Kushain Ashkabov, who looked more like a pretender than a guy to remember.
Isn't it kind of wild, though, for Jamall Emmers? You got to go back just a short little while ago. He fought a pretty close fight with Giga Chikadze.
On super short notice.
It's like, remember when Josh Smith hit all those threes when he played for the Houston Rockets? It was just that little blip. Not a lot of people are going to remember that. It was against the Clippers in the playoffs.
That's because he was a Detroit Pistons staple, Josh Smith.
He was an Atlanta Hawks staple is what I remember him for. He threw down thunderous dunks with them. But for Jamall Emmers, he has had some really nice performances on his record. But what I will say is, and you bring up to see if the skills of Jenkins are transferable, I think that bob and weave style will be quite effective against Emmers for this reason. Emmers is a guy who's going to loop a lot of his bigger power shots, and if Jenkins is able to get underneath some of those, I do think he will be able to counter. But this is what's going to be really important. Jenkins can offensively wrestle, but I do think Emmers is going to have a bit of an edge with his own wrestling in this matchup. If Emmers Emmers can make Jenkins uncomfortable on the inside when he is trying to engage his own leg kick and boxing combinations, I could see him having a lot of success because Jenkins, when he's not going to the body, he will get a little happy with his hands throwing his combinations to the head, and I could see Emmers shooting underneath and getting some offensive takedowns that way. But I really do think the offensive wrestling of Emmers is going to play a big factor in this fight, because not that I think Jenkins is going to win every moment on the feet whatsoever. I just think his striking on the inside is going to make Emmers a little bit more uncomfortable, and I do think he can force out some shots from Emmers.
Well, and that's the interesting thing when you look at both these guys. Jack Jenkins, absolute MMA conditioning down in Australia, and he's had a big supporter in Jimmy Crute for a long time, being in the UFC, kind of shouting, chanting that horse nickname, because that's what Jack Jenkins is nicknamed after, a horse, a racing horse in Australia. If you look at it for Jamall Emmers, again, the level of competition far outweighs that of Jack Jenkins. Wins over Corey Sandhagen, Alexander Hernandez, and he also has a win over Nate Diaz protege Chris Avila. Couldn't get it done in the UFC or the Ultimate Fighter or Bellator or a lot of spots. But he did have some hype at one point. If you look at it for Emmers, he's defended all 9 takedown attempts that everybody's thrown at him in the UFC. But again, we have seen him lose to Giga Chikadze. We saw that Marge Simpson, Mike Tyson punch-out uppercut against Pat Sabatini, where Emmers follows Sabatini down to the mat. He gets in a mount. Then he gets the back with the hooks in and looks like he's going to get the rear naked choke. Sabatini ending up with that heel hook, destroying the left knee of Jamall Emmers, putting him out of commission for almost 2 years. But Emmers, his last time out against Radzhabov, fought a somewhat tentative fight because he was reserved. He threw out 36 leg kicks. He landed on 17 of them, but that was a big difference maker for Emmers against an all-action Radzhabov, whose gas tank evaded him as that fight went on. So I think this is going to be a fun one. For Jenkins, it's don't get hit, get out of the way. And he is really one of those guys. Like I said, bob and weave. He's able to get in and out of range really quickly. He has a really tight, compact type of style that can carry him really far in this division. Far being the nickname, it's kind of a surprise too, because Jenkins already 30 years old. Doesn't really seem like it.
And that's why he's kind of going to get active right now, and that's why I like this matchup against Jamall Emmers. Jamall Emmers, in just a regular MMA fan's mind, might not hold a lot of stock, but if you beat a guy like Emmers, I think you do move up the division quite a bit. He's a very well-rounded fighter, like we've laid out. He is a very dangerous fighter in multiple different facets of the game. For Jenkins, if you're that 30-year-old prospect, it is time to kind of get moving, you know? You don't have a ton of time.
And the craziest part for Jenkins, he is 1-1 in his career against funky cold Jesse Medina. Man, do you think he's a big Tone Lock fan?
He could be.
He has to be. And the other loss is Sang-Won Kim, who just got a big win in the semifinals of the Rhodes UFC tournament that just happened. So Jenkins, level competition coming on to Dana White's Contender Series, combined opponent record 26-23-1. But he definitely showed out his last 2 fights and then some that he belongs at this stage. I mean, for Jamall Emmers, he's actually favored once more in this matchup ever so slightly. We have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt. Surprise to us there to you. To go back to Emmers' last fight against Radzhabov, 3,600 total votes or thereabouts, 86% Radzhabov. I don't think the script's going to be flipped. I'm going to say over under 67.5% Jenkins in this one.
I think it'll be under. I think Emmers will be the favorite.
I think Emmers is going to be favored. Wow. I swear to God, I didn't look at these. 529 total votes, 68% Jenkins, 79% by decision. For the 32% that have Emmers, 85% by decision. And the thing that I disagree with a little bit here, Emmers is one of those guys that kind of pick and pop with his shots, throws power when he needs to. He has nice knees up the middle, nice shots up the middle. You saw that against Sabatini. You saw that on the way up into the UFC. And Emmers, I mean, he's fought a really high level competition. He's also lost to a really high level competition. He himself, Erosa, he lost. He dropped him in the first round, and then he ends up getting finished the head kick and the ground and pound in the second round. Cachero, Sabatini as well. So I do like Jamall Emmers in this one. I think the takedown defense will prove out. I like the cardio to both men. The leg kick could be a giant difference maker for Jenkins. I just think the activity of Emmers could be a little bit of a difference maker.
I was really impressed by Emmers' last time out. He was coming off a really difficult loss, and like you said, the injuries at his age, you kind of worry about it, right? Like, he's going to be turning 34 not that long from now. But I do favor him in this matchup ever so slightly. I do think the power shots are going to be able to keep Jack Jenkins off of him. But I will say this, if Jenkins is able to get on the inside, I think he will have a lot of success. He's a guy who's similar to Justin Gaethje, and I'm not comparing them as fighters, but they can throw that leg kick from a really close distance. They don't need a ton of range. They don't need to lead into it. They can throw it from their boxing stance, so I do think, like you said, that'll be a really big key to this matchup.
You see that big-time 6-inch reach advantage for Emmers. You also see the fact that he's got a 3-inch height advantage. We'll see how that plays out in this matchup, because Jenks is one of those guys that can cut that distance like a knife. and then he gets out on the back and retreat and doesn't tend to take a lot of punishment. Love this fight. Both of us going with Pretty Boy, Jamall, Emmers, Matt. Some big-time fights on this card, including Trevor Peek taking on Chepe Mariscal next. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.
We have a short notice debut in an absolute banger at lightweight coming up this weekend. It is Jose Chepe Machine Gun Mariscal making that walk on 10 days notice, replacing Victor Martinez, taking on everybody's favorite standing hammer fist vet. It's Trevor Peek. And Matt, when we're talking about it, Peek is going to have a lot of fans in attendance. I listened to an interview that he did with John Eric Poli over with My MMA News, and he said he's going to have about 200 people there cheering him on in Jacksonville. And if you look at it for Peek, he's an Alabama guy, but he trains in that Chattanooga, northern Georgia area. So for everybody to make the move over to Jacksonville, it's not that far geographically. But when you look at a guy like Peek, I mean, coming into Dana White's Contender Series last year, you weren't really sure what to expect. No. He was coming off a big win over Kama Worthy. All of his wins were by knockout, and they still are. So he goes in there and he takes on Malik Lewis. And he was a nail for 5 minutes. He got beat up by Malik Lewis, but he rallied back in the last 30 seconds or so, and you saw that tide shift in the second round. He goes out there, gets a win over Lewis, and how do you not sign a guy like Peek? So then Peek parlays that forward, takes on Eric Gonzalez his last time out, and absolutely unloads. Now, Peek had a ton of success in the first minute. Then Gonzalez starts to wrestle him and had some success.
Exactly.
Gonzalez was able to land some right hands when they were on the feet, but it really was a combination of the knees and those big time, like I said, hammer fists that Peek was throwing that were able to get him the win. So Peek went from a situation where, and he said in an interview that he did with Alex Behunin, that he was working 2 jobs looking for a third, to all of a sudden that $50K performance bonus in his last time out. Now he's training full time, and you love to see that for a guy like Trevor Peek. And if you do a YouTube search on him, you know how crazy his life story is. He's absolutely turned it around, and he has found the good book. So if you look at it for Peek, coming into a matchup like this against Mariscal, who has fought some of your favorite fighters, beaten some of them.
Insane level of competition.
Lost to some of them. The thing for Mariscal is he's going to give a tough fight to a guy fighting in a bar to a top 15 contender. He fights the same way every single time.
I felt terrible for him when I was watching that Joe Anderson-Brito fight.
And I'm going to make a couple of examples, but his fight against Jose Mariscal, who the nickname in that fight was Chepe, in that fight, you look at the referee, and he stood absolutely no chance. But if your name is Curtis Thunder, you'd think, hey, Curtis, you're going to stand a chance. So what happens? Brito goes out there, and before the fight even starts, they go into the middle, and they're jawing as the ring announcer is announcing Joe Anderson-Brito. He's standing in there trash talking. English is not his first language, and he's absolutely going at it.
That life.
So Mr. Thunder does his thing, splits them up. They start to fight. Joe Anderson rushes in there, and when I watch him fight, it's either, is this guy going to glove tap, or is he going to be like a dick on UFC 4, and are we going spinning wheel kick, and Craig gets knocked out? Well, it could be either or, but in that one, they're jawing. Joe Anderson kicks him in the cup. His opponent goes to grab his cup. Mr. Thunder goes, all right, stop. And Joe Anderson goes, bang, bang, and knocks him and wobbles him. And then the fight starts back up. Joe Anderson goes in there, throws bombs, goes body kick, right hook, left hook, knocks him dead. So, again, I am very hyped up on Joe Anderson-Brito.
That's just, it's a tough performance. You know, and for Mariscal, here's the one thing I will say about him, and let's just give full respect to both these guys. I'm really excited for this fight. I think this could be a fight of the night by the time it's over. I don't think the winner of this is getting into the top 15, though, if I'm being completely honest, because for Mariscal, he has a great right hand. He can throw it from any position, really. He throws it hooks, he throws it straight. You know what the problem is, though? He doesn't set it up all that well, and he will overextend with that one big power shot quite a bit, and that's something I do worry about when he fights guys. Maybe Trevor Peek, with his sort of unorthodox style, might not be the guy to catch him, but Mariscal leaves that opening in every single one of his fights, and a lot of guys can bait that in, duck their head, and lead him into big hooks. We've seen him get rocked in a number of fights, and it's something I do worry about, especially against a guy like Peek, who we saw. With Peek, it's not just that first shot you have to worry about, that one knockout shot. If he hurts you, he is an absolute avalanche after that one big shot, and if Mariscal does see himself get rocked up against the cage because he is trying to move backwards, or he is trying to just recklessly move forwards, landing that right hand, he could walk into a massive power shot, and any variety of power shot from a guy like Trevor Peek.
And we've seen Mariscal Mariscal and the career of one Carlos Hernandez, who looked great last weekend, kind of weave and intertwine, because for Mariscal, 2014 IMMAF gold medalist at the World Championships in the lightweight division. You also had Carlos Hernandez winning a belt there. You also had one Shorty Torres and Amanda Hebos, all of them successful names at the 2014 IMMAF World Championships. But for Mariscal, becoming a pro, you go down through it. And again, as I said, he's taken on a very, very high-level competition. Maybe he hasn't beaten everybody, but he loses to Gregor Gillespie. He loses to Bryce Mitchell. He fought Carl Deaton, who's now in the UFC. He beat Pat Sabatini. He beat Yusuf Zalal. But then he has losses to Brito, Garcia, and Sean Soriano. If you go back and you watch these fights from Mariscal, his last time out, main event's LFA 153. That was his third LFA main event. In that one, misses weight at featherweight. That's why you see 150 pounds there. But in that one, his opponent beats him up in the first round, and then he rallies in the second round and ends up getting the win. If you watch him fighting Jordan Beltran over with Combate, he gets the win there. Beltran's record a little bit suspect. He beats Luke Faltersack over with Cage Warriors at Cage Warriors 133. They've had some California cards. That was one of those American cards. And in that one, Faltersack lands some good shots, but you end up having Mariscal getting the win. If you watch Mariscal's fight against Sean Soriano and the fight against Faltersack and the fight against Joanderson Brito, I think if you consider for Mariscal, he's got a magnet in his cup for nut shots.
It must be terrible.
Because in the fight against Sean Soriano, he gets kicked in the twice in the first round. Soriano loses a point. But the biggest problem I have is a red flag in that CFFC fight against Soriano. What does Soriano excel at? The wrestling. What's Sean Soriano not good at? Wrestling. He's a good striker. So Mariscal had some success in the striking. Soriano took over in the grappling. And by the end of it, round 2, round 3, Mariscal was really shooting for some takedowns that were defended by Soriano, who ended up getting on top. He loses to Steve Garcia again in an LFA main event. Mariscal's been a springboard for a lot of fighters that you know, but again, he's picked up some really good wins in the past, training out of Elevation with Tatsuro Taira in this one, as well as Justin Gaethje and some other big fighters. For Trevor Peek, Agoji Combatives, a seminar with Britton Hart recently. That's a feeling, man.
I'm a feeling, and all of you guys are gonna feel it.
That's a feeling. So if you do consider this matchup, I think it'll be a lot of fun. The one big-time headliner that I got out of that John Eric Poli interview that Trevor Peek did here in the last couple of weeks, he said, or John Eric said, "How's your camp been so far and how are you feeling?" And Trevor said, "I'm tired." He laughs. "I've got 2 black eyes, whole body's bruised up and scratched up. Man, I put myself through a heck of a training camp and I'm ready to start tapering down and letting my body, you know, regroup and everything. But as far as camp goes, man, it's been solid." So Trevor Peek
sounds like he's been putting the work in.
Putting the body through the ringer. But again, it should be a big time matchup for these two guys. And I think, again, they match up really well. Obviously, Mariscal on the 10 days notice, up a weight class. You consider the odds in this one. Peek is favored. We have a Tapology vote. Or look at the Tapology votes, see what the fans are thinking. Matt, I'm going to set the over-under at 70% Peek. What do you say?
I'll say under.
You're going to say under?
Way over.
306 total votes, 92% Peek, 88% by knockout. For the 8% that have Mariscal, 50% by knockout, 42% by decision. I don't think a lot of people watch tape on this fight. What do you say for picking this one?
I think Mariscal has a good chance to win this fight, and I think this is a good debut for him. You know, some guys get their debut against, like, the 5th-ranked fighter on a week's notice, and guess what? They're probably not going to win that fight. But this fight against Peek, if he can make it uncomfortable and really implement his wrestling, I do think he can have some success with his offensive shots if he's able to make Peek uncomfortable on the feet. But I do have Trevor Peek in the end. I just think Mariscal leaves some openings while he goes for some of his strikes, and I think Peek's going to be able to make him pay for them, even though Peek is not a guy like Yair Rodrigues. You watch his strikes and it's just picture perfect. Peek is also going to leave some openings, so you can come at me in the comment section for that. I just think Peek's going to be able to make Mariscal pay a little bit
Mariscal holds his hands low at the start of the fight. By round 2, round 3, even round 2, they're waist height. He gets hit by right hands. He will blitz like Dricus Duplessis, and there's a lot on it. Like, there really is. The blitzes are good. Mariscal's base is in wrestling and in judo, and if you watch that Soriano fight, his walkout is 2011's biggest banger of all time by Will.i.am. THE. You can go hard or you can go home. What a walkout for Mariscal. I think Mariscal gets it done with his wrestling. I've seen Peak show his susceptibility to struggling with the wrestling on the regional scene. We saw it against Malik Lewis. We saw it against Eric Gonzalez. Nobody's been able to make him pay. And Mariscal is going to be tricky because he might have a reach advantage if you go by kind of those LFA numbers that I have on screen. But he is a small guy at featherweight, and he's a pretty darn small guy at lightweight. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm taking a shot at the dark with Chepe Mariscal to get the win. Matt going with the human highlight reel. It is Trevor Peak. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. Some big time fights on this card. You are not going to want to miss them. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Grapplers meet in Florida as a Miami-based Canadian, the Savage Gillian Robertson, takes on California-based Brazilian Baby Shark Tabatha Ricci. And if you consider for Gillian Robertson riding a wave of success, her last time out, she beat Tabatha Ricci's teammate, Piera Rodrigues, beat her by armbar. For Ricci, she beat Jessica Penne by armbar, and that's very impressive. But if you consider for Robertson, which one of these two fighters was recently on the Joe Rogan MMA show? It was the fighter with the bright red hair. So fans are going to be all over the Savage in this matchup. And how could you not? I mean, a flyweight record holder, most submissions there. And if you consider it all time in UFC history, she is right up there in terms of the submission. So if you look at it for Robertson, riding a wave, if you look at the losses that she has in that flyweight division, yeah, she has lost to Taila Santos. Yeah, she has some losses to upper echelon competition. But if you're around the fringes of the top 15, Robertson, well, she's been able to beat a lot of those fighters. And for Ricci, kind of the opposite thing. She comes in on short notice, fights Manon Fiorot, loses at flyweight, struggles with the striking, and then she goes down to strawweight, and she's really been able to pick off some of these fringe 15 fighters. Maria Oliveira, and then, of course, Poliana Viana before it is that win over Jessica Penne. So again, both these women accredited in Jiu-Jitsu. Robertson, American Top Team. Dean Thomas, Goat Shed Academy. For Ricci, she splits time between Paragon BJJ, where she is a jiu-jitsu instructor. We know how good she is in the gi, but she is one of those credited jiu-jitsu black belts in her own right. A national amateur Muay Thai champ in Brazil. And Ricci training at a big gym in Ruka Sport with some of the better women in this division. And I know for Robertson, she did a recent interview where she was talking to David Van Auken with Fight Bananas. And the fight that Robertson's pining for after a win over Ricci is Mackenzie Dern. Tabatha Ricci trains with Mackenzie Dern too, so it seems like Tabatha Ricci's kind of been on the wall for a while. We'll see if it's only murders in the building type material. For Robertson, she's able to figure out that puzzle. But Matt, when you look at a matchup like this, Robertson kind of alluded to it in that interview, the fact that the striking of Rodrigues is a lot more polished than her teammate Ricci's. And the opposite, like Rodrigues, big-time boxer, not a lot of takedown defense. Ricci, good takedown defense, good wrestling, a lot of kicks. Kind of wild with the boxing.
Well, that's the thing. If we are in for a 15-minute striking affair between these two, it's not going to be the greatest fight of all time. I think that's fair to say. But I think we could get one of those really fun kind of scramble fest, Louis Smolka, Tim Elliott type fights because both fighters are so talented on the ground. But to me, Gillian Robertson's like Tony Allen. You remember Tony Allen? He played on the Celtics. He played on the Grizzlies.
Just playing defense.
But that's what Gillian Robertson reminds me of. How does every rookie start playing in most sports? They have that one thing that gets them playing time, and then they start to round out the rest of their game. For Robertson, her striking has gotten better, don't get me wrong, but it's not the thing that's going out there and getting her a lot of wins at the highest level. It's still the offensive wrestling. It's still the great threat of submissions when she is able to get it down to the ground. But for Robertson, I wonder how far that's going to be able to carry her because, like you said, she is still kind of fighting those fringe top 15 fighters where at this point in her career, she's one of the most longest tenured, like 125ers there is in the division. You don't get those counting stats like she has with her submissions without spending a lot of time in the division. So for Robertson, it always has been a matter of what is going to be the next skill that kind of breaks through for her because the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu, we know how far that's going to carry her. That's why I'll be curious to see if Ricci can have success off of her back because Robertson's going to be difficult to take down offensively. She is such a talented offensive wrestler, and I do think Robertson's going to be the one who will get in the top position. I just don't know if Ricci's going to be able to sweep her way off her back.
I don't know if I agree with everything you just said. I mean, Robertson has 25% takedown defense.
It's not great
UFC.
numbers, but I don't think Robertson's going to be defending a ton, but it's against decent fighters.
Robertson's Robertson's takedown defense is kind of like Mackenzie Dern's. I mean, poor percentage-wise, but it sets up the jiu-jitsu nonetheless. If you want to take it there, she will oblige. Now, there's 2 fights that are outliers to that. I already referenced one, the Taila Santos fight. I mean, she did recently lose to J.J. Aldrich, but that was a striking affair. The other loss that she has on her record, Macy Barber finished her with a knockout. You see that fight against Maeda Buena Silva where it's a submission loss. If you do consider it for a fighter like Gillian Robertson, the Miranda Maverick fight's another tough one where she got ground out on the mat and wasn't really able to get anything going. And as I said, in terms of the top of all-time UFC fights, she's tied 8th all-time in UFC history with Alexei Oleinik, Glover Teixeira, Ronnie Yaya, Joe Lozon, Cole Miller, and Kenny Florian. Most all-time submissions with 7. So pretty cool to see that for Gillian Robertson in the UFC lore. But if you do consider this matchup, Tabatha Ricci with some of that Saiza experience over there in Japan, the MMA, the crazy rules, just like Yulia Stoliarenko. If I look at this matchup, Matt, I mean, again, numbers on a page, both women are very, very good. Robertson's going to have a big size advantage in this fight, being a former flyweight. Her last time out against Rodrigues was that move down to strawweight. And if you look at it for Robertson, this is her first pro fight in Florida since her pro debut against Hannah Goldie that she lost over with the Island fight. So we'll see how that one plays out. Both those women train together now, so pretty interesting because Goldie's a smaller strawweight who can strike on the outside. So we'll see how this one goes, Matt. Robertson coming in actually as an underdog, so that's also kind of interesting. You look at the topology votes in this one to see where the fans are thinking. I'm going to say over under 67.5% Robertson on this one.
I'll say over.
You're going to say over? It's the opposite. 639 or 35 total votes, 69% Ricci, 84% by decision for the 31% that have Robertson, 68% by submission. So who's the pick in the fight?
Whoever gets on top is going to win this fight. That's probably who's going to win. Like, if Tabatha Ricci could scramble, get on top, get a dominant position, I think she will be able to maintain it. But like you said, I think the size advantage from Robertson's going to be able to help her. If she is the one in that top position, there's a lot more energy Ricci's going to have to spend to try to get out from some of those negative spots. So ever so slightly, I'm going to go with Robertson, but I think we are going to get a grappling heavy fight, and those are difficult to score, right? Because we're going to get back and forth positions. If it doesn't end by submission, it's going to be a difficult one to judge by the time it comes down to it.
And Robertson's one of those fighters, really high guard, kind of hold one arm out there, launch some punches. It's a Donnybrook when you're fighting Gillian Robertson. It really is. But if you do look at it for somebody like Ricci at Blockhouse, training with Sabina Mazo, training with Molly McCann, training with, who else? I mean, just any big name you want to pick, they are there. I have a hard time with the pick. I do like Gillian Robertson in the matchup with the size advantage, but again, the kicks out of Ricci, the fact that she can really try and drive the head into position when the fight's up against the cage, and if she can dominate in some of those spots, she could have a lot of success. The Robertson win over, it might surprise you, Maria Agapova was really telling for me because struggled a little bit with the striking and the kicks of Agapova, but when it got into some of those grappling exchanges, Robertson was able to win out. Matt, both of us might be a surprise to you folks going with a Canadian in Gillian Robertson to get the win. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. Some big time matchups, including the next one. It's no longer the Jaguar power. We're going Tajik Tank. Wow. Laik Radzhabov taking on Mateusz Rebecki. A big time one. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Big time lightweight action in the respective second times out. We have the former FEN lightweight champ putting his 14-fight unbeaten streak on the line. It's Rebecki, Mateusz Rebecki, and he's taking on the former 2-time PFL lightweight finalist, Tajik Tank. It's not the Jaguar paw anymore. Laik Radzhabov out of Killcliff FC. And Southern Florida really represented in this fight. Killcliff with Radzhabov, American top team with Rebecki. And if you consider it for Rebecki, training with some big-time fighters over there. Sweet Prince, Marlon Moraes, one of them.
Oh,
but if you look at it for a guy like Rebecki, it's got to be awkward because you're the hotness out of Poland at lightweight, but also a guy that you fought at ADCCs is also there in Mateusz Gamrot. So a couple of big-time Mateusz's out of that gym. Is that the plural? Is it
well, we were just both really surprised Rebecki had to fight Allen Contender Series before he came into the UFC.
Yeah, it was really one of those Albert Duraev type situations. And for Rebecki, when he was on Contender Series, fought a very interesting fighter that should honestly be in the UFC in Rodrigo Lidio. And he had the no-hook side crank rear naked choke. I'll throw the picture up there. It was wild for Rebecki. If you go back and you look at this win streak, beating really good fighters over with FEN, fought the Well, I guess due to inactivity and the injuries, he's no longer the KSW lightweight champ. But Marian Zilkowski, now it's Saladin Palnas, that double champ. But if you look at it for Rebecki, his last time out, he was supposed to fight a much better fighter than Nick Fiore. He ended up getting Fiore on short notice. It was originally supposed to be Omar Morales. And in that fight, Matt, Rebecki gets the win, looks great in the first round, but Mateusz Rebecki had a fight his last time out, like Arman Tsarukyan just had against Joaquim Silva. You look at the win, it's great. You look at the third round, it's great. But Rebecki didn't look great against Fiore.
He got tested a lot more than we both kind of originally thought.
He was so tired at the end of the first
And that was surprising to see because I really thought not only the work rate, but along with his takedowns, his striking, like he's a well-rounded fighter. And he does have a good gas tank. So I was really surprised to see that because I thought it was going to be one of those maybe not huge mismatches in a debut, but you get what I said. I just said it in the previous video. Some people make their debuts.
He was a minus 750 favorite in that fight. It should have been a thumping.
Exactly, but it wasn't. And that's what gives me a little bit of hesitation in this matchup against Radzhabov, because how many takedowns did Laik go for and complete in his last fight? It was in the double digits. I believe it was 11 by the time the fight was over.
11 of 21.
Exactly. If he has a similar game plan in this fight against Rebecki to where he's going for high levels of takedowns, and I'm not saying the numbers are going to be the same to where he's completing 50%, but if he can make him work for those 20 attempts, I'll be curious to see what the gas tank of Mateusz looks like in the later parts of this fight, because Radzhabov, is a guy who will just not stop going for them.
He is dog cardio too. Both these guys have awful cardio.
But at least when he goes for a lot of those mat returns, because I will say a lot of those takedowns will kind of be he's maintaining the position, he's going back down. He stays dedicated to it, and I do think that's a wearing attack, that's all.
Well, we talked a lot about Laik Radzhabov before his UFC debut. He also came in on very short notice, yet he was replacing a fighter, and he took on Esteban Ribovics in a very interesting fight. Ribovics gets a knockdown in that one, but we have a lot to say about Radzhabov, so let's throw it on over to that. Because you talk about a guy with a finishing rate, and I know it's not to the 100% like a guy like Ribovics, but it's because Radzhabov's fought a very high level of competition, and even in his last fight, you'll see the asterisks on the screen. It was a short notice catchweight fight, super lightweight against Zach Zane, who's fought for Ryzen, Contender Series.
He's been around.
He's fought with Bellator. He's fought with Titan. Zach Zane has been around. Laik Radzhabov went in there and said, He goes for the takedown. Zane gets him in that really weird Kimura lock. What does Radzhabov do? Flips out of it. Exactly. He ends up in a good position. He gets the finish against Zach Zane. But Radzhabov, you know him for the wild looping hooks. You know him for the heavy power. You know him for his power bar. We're going to talk about power bar later on this card. Yes. Marc-Andre Barrio, a guy who stays steady throughout his fights. Radzhabov tends to burn hot. And then he goes down a little bit.
That's a bit of an issue.
5-round fights, not as much. It's been weird. But for Radzhabov, all gas, no brakes. You hate to talk about it. But you had Gilbert Burns coming out on Twitter not that long ago in the last couple of weeks defending Laik Radzhabov because it seemed like he'd be one of those veterans that would end up on The Ultimate Fighter, like Austin Hubbard, like Brad Katona, who's on the season. There are a lot of these, Jason Knight's another one of them, that was going to end up on that season.
Roberts.
Did McGregor bring in his own guys? Did he not? We don't know. But all of a sudden now, Radzhabov goes from Aliyev makes that debut, has all the fans behind him, and then that next day or in that 24 hours, Radzhabov's in the UFC, and he's getting an opportunity against a very, very hype prospect.
It is a difficult fight for him, but here's the thing about Radzhabov. It will be interesting to see how he progresses in the UFC because his strengths are very obvious, but he does have some obvious weaknesses as well. He kind of fights like more high-volume Dan Henderson to a certain degree. He is very high up with his boxing stance, and he's not a huge kicker. He'll throw a light kick every now and then, and I would say he has become more of a kicker as his career has progressed.
They do a lot of damage as it's progressed.
Exactly.
They have done damage.
But he doesn't really go to the body or the head, and he does have to get close to get a lot of his effective damage done. Now, and you brought it up too, when he's able to implement the takedown into his game and get on top of his opponent, he is a very damaging grappler, and he's an intelligent grappler too, because he's not just good in those set positions that we all know, the full guards, the half guards. He's someone who is comfortable with scrambling and can be comfortable in uncomfortable positions. And I know that might seem like a cliche, but it's a very nice skill to have when you're making your UFC debut. And that's why I am happy that Radzhabov doesn't have to take the Ultimate Fighter route, because he's too good to be on the Ultimate Fighter, for being honest. Now,
a lot of those guys are.
Exactly. I know this season they might be doing a new twist or whatever. They're bringing back former fighters, but Radzhabov has fought some very good fighters in the past. You had brought it up. His level of competition is very good, but the thing about Radzhabov is if you're a high-volume fighter with a lot of long-range attacks who has good takedown defense, and I know I'm starting to build up a pretty good fighter right now, but there's guys like that who exist out there, and there's a lot of them in the UFC, you can start to gain offense against him at distance, and I will be curious to see if Radzhabov can continue to progress at the UFC level, because he is still in his early 30s, but he has been fighting this way for a while now. So I'll just be curious to see if he can implement some more of those longer range weapons, because I think once he is able to do that, that's really going to be able to kind of finish out his skill set.
And if I was able to use Dana White's wording and my own verbiage, I would say Loic Radzhabov, the kid's shop-worn, because if you look at his fights, he hammers the shots, and he does tend to tire as fights go on, but he fights at a high pace when they start, and he really does like to go for the grappling. And you look at some of his takedowns, he'll do a body lock to then trip. He'll pick you up and throw you. Like, he is a bit of an unorthodox takedown artist.
He has a good chin, I will say this. He has been cracked by some good shots in the past, and he has been able to stand up to them.
His fight IQ is very good, because when he gets hit, he then tends to wrestle. He's kind of like a Michael Chandler in that respect. Not that he really does fight like Chandler, but you go down through Radzhabov's record, 7 wins by knockout, 5 by submission. The only losses on his record are by decision. One against Hausch Manfield. That was in the 2021 PFL Finals. Now,
that was a good fight, too.
Yeah, it was a good fight, and Radzhabov was a heavy favorite to win that. If you went by the verdict scorecards,
the higher ceiling.
Radzhabov was the winner, but if you go by actually using your eyeballs and watching the fight, Manfield won 2 of the rounds.
He landed a lot of right hands.
If you look at it, yeah, Manfield landed the right hand. There were some takedowns and some scrambles in that fight. There were some big shots by Radzhabov as well, and his gas tank actually held up pretty well. And Manfield, to his credit, was a super underdog to win the season. He was a plus 1,000 at the start of the year. Lost by split decision to Alex Martinez, the half Canadian. He was able to get that back on that season. He lost to Natan Schultz in the PFL Finals the season before. He has a draw on his record to Islam Mamedov, who's now, 22-2 over with Bellator. And in that fight, it was a draw. And then at the end, they went, we're going to a judge's decision as to who moves on in the tournament. And they all decided it was Radzhabov, and the other lost to Rashid Magomedov. So
a good fighter, but you would never pay money to watch that man fight.
But Radzhabov tends to struggle against pure grapplers and guys that can throw a lot of volume on the outside. And everybody in between, apart from that, he's able to have a lot of success against. So a lot of fun in these fights. You want to see a big highlight reel win for Radzhabov. It's his win in 2021 over Akhmed Aliyev, who had a great record and a great level of competition. He goes into that one. He stalks him, throws an uppercut, and then he goes, left hook, right hook. He drops him. He ends up getting the TKO finish in 27 seconds. But I mean, other than that, I can go all through the Manfield fight. I can go through a lot of these fights that Radzhabov's had. It was a big left hook, right hook to the body, and then he followed it up with another hook, Ribovics, with that second round knockdown. But as you alluded to, Radzhabov, first round gets the win, third round gets the win, utilizes those takedown, 11 of 21 on those. And we saw it out of Radzhabov. I mean, some 5-round fights, wonky cardio. Some 3-round fights, also wonky cardio. Both of these guys kind of tested in their respective last fights. So I'm eager to see what we get out of these guys, because for Rebecki, he likes to cut the gap by throwing big power hooks, and then he ultimately gets his own takedowns. Radzhabov is a little bit more creative with some of his entries. You'll see shovel hooks. You'll see odd angle counters. I love this fight, but I have a really, really hard time trying to make a pick, because both guys are extremely high level to be matched up in their second UFC fights. I think this is going to be an awesome one. Rebecki is the slight favorite in the matchup. We have a look at the Tapology vote. Surprise us there to you. You guys in the comments are going to be all over this one. I'm going to say over under 70% Rebecki in the matchup.
I'll say over, but I feel like I've got them all wrong.
It is, I swear to you.
You've looked these up.
No, I promise you. I pinky
Craig,
swear in front of the world. 614 total votes, 70% Rebecki, 30% have Radzhabov. A heavy amount have this fight to go to a decision. Tajik Tank taking on Rebecki. Who's the pick here?
The reason I bring up the mat returns of Radzhabov is I think we're going to get a lot of those, not stall out positions, because both guys are going to be really active. I just think both guys have good levels of takedown defense along with good wrestling, to where we're going to get a lot of those clinch spots that are really difficult to judge. But I think Radzhabov's going to be the one who's at least forcing some of the fight. I think it's a difficult one to predict, because I agree with where the Tapology votes, at least they're split decision-wise. I think this will probably go to a decision. Both guys are talented enough to where they don't leave those massive openings in their game plan. So ever so slightly, I will take the slight underdog.
It's going to be interesting too, because a southpaw look out of Rebecki the last time out, where you saw, I mean, Gribovics mixing things up, throwing those hooks. That's exactly the game plan for a guy like Rebecki. So it really is a tricky one. I will go with Mateusz Rebecki in the matchup ever so slightly. I've been talking about Laik Radzhabov for years now on this channel.
Wow.
So listen, I mean, sometimes you just got to set yourself on the bench, ride the pines, and make a different decision. But both of us split on this pick. I have Poland, Rebecki to get the win. Matt going with the recently renamed or re-nicknamed Tajik Tank to get the win. Let us know down below who you have in the matchup, because Matt, Tajikistan, they get fired up for their fighters, and so does Poland. Some big time fights left on this card. The main event, Emmett taking on Ilia Topuria. If you're not excited, you should be. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Couple of welterweights looking to get back to winning ways. Rude Boy Randy Brown is looking to show up a little bit better than Rihanna's halftime show, hitting the Rude Boy, taking on
the prodigy, pardon me.
It's Wellington, Turman, and Matt. For Turman, his first time back at welterweight since 2017. Started off his pro career there. He was also an amateur at welterweight, 2-0 as an amateur, 12-2 as a pro welterweight. And I mean, the only losses that he had as a pro at welterweight, and I'll throw one of the pictures up there, was against Jean Sequeira, and also Carlston Harris. So some big time fights for Turman. If you go back and watch his fight against Carlston Harris, Turman, Whirling Dervish, all he does is throw the kitchen sink at Carlston Harris in that one. Harris has some really good counters, which Randy Brown could throw out there. But if you look at it for both these guys, Turman makes that move up to middleweight, has a lot of size to him, really, really heavy with his grappling. And out of Turman in the UFC and his fights, is he 2-4? Yeah. Has it been good? No. I mean, his wild come-from-behind win against Misha Serkinov, a performance of the night bonus, that was pretty cool. You've seen him dropped against Andrew Sanchez. You've seen him dropped against Bruno Silva, or dropped into some bad positions and finished. He lost to Carl Robertson by split decision. And his last time out, Wellington Turman's usually a really good grappler. He got ground out by Andre Petroski. Yeah. So now he moves down to welterweight. He's not facing a premier grappler whatsoever in Rude Boy Randy Brown. Randy Brown usually gets it done with those long-range attacks and his striking, but his last time out, he got his lead leg kicked off. He got hit by that big-time shot where it was cartoonish and he face-planted into the mat. Then you had Della jumping onto the back, trying to gain the hooks. He gets the rear naked choke and finishes Randy Brown in his hometown, and Randy Brown sacrificed a pretty big win streak in that matchup as well.
He did. It was kind of a surprising fight to take, because most guys in his position wouldn't really have to, right? He was on his own win streak. Not that he's still a prospect, but Randy Brown at one point, like, he fought Bilal Muhammad way back in the day, and that was one of those, like, which one could actually get into the top 15 kind of fights, and that's been the story for Randy Brown. He's able to get his way to the top 15, but it does feel like when he fights...
Hold on. You said this last weekend, but Randy Brown's never been near the top 15.
He fought Vicente Luque. He just fought Jack Della Maddalena, who got ranked off a win against him.
Anybody he's fought, he's lost to. He's never gotten near the top 15.
But that's my point. When he does fight those guys, he loses to them. That's the whole point I was making, but you jumped to the end before I could. My thing about Randy Brown is, I do think he is a very talented fighter. He has a very wide variety of skills, and he is a well-rounded fighter. I know the wrestling isn't at the forefront of his game. I know the submissions aren't, but it's not like that's the game plan when you're fighting Randy Brown. Oh, he's a long-rangey striker. Let's go out there and take him down, because Randy Brown is a pretty talented grappler once he's able to get it on the mat. The problem is, when he fights those upper echelon guys who are really able to not only wrestle him, but hold him down on the mat, we have seen him struggle in some of those positions. But that was the whole thing I was going to talk about with Randy Brown. It was guys like Nico Price, who, again, even Nico Price isn't really a borderline top 15 fighter. He's a guy who can go out there and put a fun fight against anybody. We will see Brown make those tiny mistakes in some of those in-betweens. We saw Luque hurt him with the knees. We saw Price hit him with some of those unorthodox shots. I just feel like for Brown, it always has been a case of putting the whole skill set together. And at 32, almost 33 years of age, I wonder if we're just always going to kind of be left with some of those what-ifs.
Yeah, I mean, Randy Brown is kind of in Impa Kasanganai territory. Like, the back hammer fist knockout, that really is tough for a guy like Randy Brown. And when you consider it, I had a little bit of a write-down here in my notes. It's 4 words to describe both of these guys. Balls of nervous energy. That's exactly how they fight. Randy Brown will kind of hang around on the outside, and he won't pick his kick, and he won't pick his shots. And Wellington Turman, again, the Harris fight, if you go down through it, you watch that fight against Misha Serkinov, you look at his fight against Andrew Sanchez, he was a little bit too calm and cool when he's fighting former teammate and Bruno Silva in the grappling exchanges. He fought Sam Alvey to a split decision, and then his last time out against Andre Petroski. For Turman coming into the UFC, we're excited because he showed off a good chin. He showed off really good volume. He showed off really good takedowns. If he can bring that forward into welterweight where he started his career off, that could really show up to show out. So it is interesting. I mean, Turman is still a young guy. He's almost 27, but he has had a lot of pro experience.
And I gotta be honest, I thought he looked big at 185. Like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna be a little surprised to see him come back down to 170. I know he's fought here before. I know he's a young guy, but I thought he added that mass kind of with the mindset of, I'm gonna leave that weight class behind, because I really thought Turman was a big physical guy up a weight class.
And the champ camps kind of fizzled out a little bit in Connecticut for the Brazilians at this point, but I'll throw a picture up there of Wellington Turman with Glover Teixeira here in the last little bit. You can see it out of Turman, kind of giving up some size. His former opponent, Misha Serkinov, did that, moved down to 185, did not work out for him, but it almost did. Wellington Turman somehow survived that blitz. So if you look at this one, Matt, Randy Brown is a slight favorite in the matchup. A very, very interesting striker on the outside. Turman's been a net negative in the UFC so far. We have a look at the Topology votes. See what the fans are thinking on this one. I think that they're wilding this week, and I'm going to say over under 80% Randy Brown.
I think it'll be over.
I think it's going to be over. It is way over. 655 total votes, 93% Brown. 62% by decision, 29% by knockout for the 7% that have Wellington Turman, 48% by decision. Who do you have in the matchup here?
I think Turman can have success holding Brown up against the cage. I think that's going to be important, too, to cut through some of those range-finding attacks that a guy like Brown does employ. Because Tony Ferguson's always the guy I think of when I think about teep kicks up the middle that aren't necessarily push kicks. They're more for damage. Randy Brown does really like some of those kicks as well. And I think those are going to be important. I know I initially bring up how Turman can negate those, but I do like those long-range strikes of Randy Brown. I don't think Turman has the inside power of a guy like Della Maddalena, who can get you up against the cage, go to the body, and use some of those boxing combinations. So I do have Brown in the matchup.
Listen to Matt at half speed on this video, but if you look at it for Randy Brown, the fight that I really want to go back to and focus in on, look at his fight against Brian Barberena, where he ends up rallying, getting the finish in that one. He's got a 4-to-4 knockdown ratio in the UFC, which is not the greatest, but if you look at that win streak that he had, Alex Oliveira, the one-arm guillotine, Jared Gooden, Chaos Williams, and Francisco Trinaldo, the win over Williams, the win over Trinaldo, kind of showing the fact that Brown can be reserved, but he could still mix those strikes out there, throw the power into his shots, and throw that teep either to the body in the breadbasket or mix it up as a front kick. I like those strikes out of Randy Brown, but if he gets held up and held back, he leaves his chin way out there, and the fact that he has that height advantage doesn't always play out to his advantage. So, Matt, both of us going with Rude Boy Randy Brown in the matchup. Let us know down below in the comment section who you have in this matchup. Some big-time fights left on this card. The main event. Oh, boy. You have Josh Emmett taking on Ilia Topuria. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Do you like Tim Sylvia? Do you like Heath Herring? Do you like Big Nog? If you consider this matchup, Matt, this is the most 2008 heavyweight fight that you're going to get in 2023. Coming up this weekend, we have the bad man, Justin Tafa, taking on former NFL player. And it's real. He's a real NFL player. Austen Lane, a man who was drafted in the 5th round by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And he had a cup of coffee with the Detroit Lions at the end of his career. But last weekend, Zach Paunga, they said he played for the Houston Texans, didn't play a snap for them. Austen Lane really started games in the NFL, and if you consider it, I mean, players to come out of Murray State. Quincy Williams, also drafted by the Jaguars. Not a lot of big-time fighters, or at least NFL players out of Murray State.
Didn't John Morant go there?
But a guy in Austen Lane that ran a 4.58. 40. So wild for Austen Lane, parlayed that into an MMA career, a lot of early finishes, fought Greg Hardy on Contender Series, lost, picked up some more wins after losing his fight off Contender Series. And then you had Lane coming in, getting that big win his last time out, and ultimately making his way into the UFC. Beat Richard Jacoby. We did a big video ahead of that on our Contender Series show, so let's throw it on over to a clip from that show. And the comment was out there of how good Austen Lane looked on the scales. This guy's 6'6" at heavyweight. He has an 80-inch reach, and Richard Jacoby, 6'4", 75-inch reach. I don't know, Matt.
Nothing you're saying is wrong, but I'm not sold on Austen Lane either.
No,
like Austen Lane, I vividly remember for being super hyped up before he fought Greg Hardy. They were like, hey, this is the top-ranked Southern United States heavyweight. That's what they were calling him going into that show. It was like one of those baseball stats where they're like, this guy hasn't given up a run in the 4th of May in 6 years. But for Austen Lane, he was really hyped up on his first entry into Contender Series because he is that big, intimidating-looking heavyweight. When he can fight on his terms under his rhythm, he is really good. But the problem is, guys get on the inside of his reach very easily, and he's not a durable guy once they do. He's not someone who can then, make the fight really ugly, fight his way to the outside, circle off, and then get his distance back. If you make it ugly, there's a very good chance that one of your shots can reach his chin at a certain point. And if it does, up until this point in his career, he hasn't really shown the best susceptibility to getting hit by shots. Like, I remember the Frank Tate fight right after the Greg Hardy fight, too. They were like, wow, Austen Lane, he's getting back on the train. And what happened in that matchup? He also gets stopped. So for Lane, I think the skills are there, but there's also a lot of those pitfalls, too, that the classic heavyweight can fall into when they believe in their own power a little too much.
And this fight's really weird. Like, again, if you didn't know, Austen Lane was on season 2 of Dana White's Contender Series 2018, gets finished by Greg Hardy in 57 seconds. And I see it in the comments, Matt, from CT710 saying Lane is so long, but he does this thing where he leans in and throws combos and is going to get caught. And Dan Goldstein says Lane was catching butterflies after Hardy hit him instead of defending the next shot. One shot will boop him, not as the favorite. And CT also finishing up saying if he was fighting a wrestler, it'd be free contract for his opponent. The weird thing about this one, I think Austen Lane, very good striker when it's on his own terms, and he hasn't fought the best level competition either. Like, you consider it, his last 2 wins are really big. He finishes Juan Adams in the Fury FC title fight in the 4th round. You like to see that durability. He beats Eric Lunsford his last time out to defend the belt. That was back in February. His other losses, you said Frank Tate, one to Greg Hardy, one to Vernon Lewis, who's been good with LFA, who's been good with Bellator as well. So Jacoby, being an accredited striker out of Brazil, low volume, high power, gets the takedown against Austen Lane that gets reversed, and then it's Lane landing the ground and pound. Now, this is an awkward fight because Tafa, Junior Tafa, was supposed to welcome Austen Lane into the UFC at UFC 284. Lane is out due to a bicep injury. I won't show it, but you can go to his Instagram and see the muscle popping out. If you look at it for Lane, now he gets this opportunity against Justin Tafa, not Junior Tafa. And Matt, this is where I'm going to lead it off to you. I will admit when I'm wrong, and I will admit when I'm wrong often. Out of Justin Tafa fights in the UFC,
I think people have watched our videos.
I'm 2-4 in picking Justin Tafa fights. You're 3-3. We've been bad at picking Justin Tafa fights.
Because he just fights in one of those 50-50 kind of styles. You know, when you
2008 heavyweight style?
When you rely on the power like a guy like Justin Tafa, it's going to leave a lot of holes in your game because you just rely on that one massive outlier. Chris Davis is who I bring up all the time. Now, Chris Davis might have been on Adderall when he hit a lot of home runs, but Davis was a guy who relied a lot on his power. And then, when everything else started to fade away and he just had the power, there wasn't really enough left for him to maintain his spot at kind of the major league level.
The two Chris's, Chris Davis and
Baltimore Oriole Chris Davis.
Baltimore Oriole Chris Davis, not Crush Davis or Crush Davis if you want, but Chris Carter as well that played for Houston.
But this
leads the league in homers, and a few years later, he's out.
Well, like, Kyle Schwarber's probably going to be playing for, like, a regular, like, house league here any day now, because Kyle Schwarber's a negative WAR player, but hits a ton of home runs. My point is, with Justin Tafa, he is one of these outliers who relies on his outlier strength, which is good. You want a guy to do what gets him to the dance, but when Tafa does rush forward recklessly, we saw that in his fight against Yorgan De Castro, right? De Castro closed his eyes and threw a right hand, and it was still enough to knock out Tafa. What I will say about Austen Lane, though, is I know they bring it up a lot in the Greg Hardy fight, but no matter what your thoughts of Greg Hardy was, he was a really good athlete, right? Like, you don't make it to the NFL without being a really good athlete. Austen Lane at 6'6", I do think has plus athleticism. He's a big guy who uses his speed and uses his strengths quite well, and he moves well for being such a big frame at the heavyweight division.
He kicks well, and he closes distance really well.
But the thing that I do worry about with Lane is he's a guy who stays for the receipt, to quote Teddy Atlas, when he throws a lot of his boxing combinations. That's how Greg Hardy was able to catch him. When he throws a lot of those bigger straight shots, there is a detriment to be having, you know, massive arms and being a really long-rangey striker. When you miss on some of those rangier strikes, you can get caught by counter shots. Now, I don't know if Tafa's going to have the head movement to really be able to duck out of some of those initial shots and make him pay for them, but this is one of those fights where I think it's pretty easy to lay out a game plan for how both guys could win.
I disagree with you on Tafa in two respects, because again, I'm 2-4 in picking his fights, so it's not good, but the breakdown of a Tafa fight, yeah, he overreached in that fight that he had at Marvel Stadium in his UFC debut against Yorgan De Castro. The other two losses, a really close decision to Carlos Felipe and a close decision to Jared Van Deren. Justin Tafa is one of those guys, you see it on screen, 266 his last time out. He came in at 267 against Harry Hunsuck at Hunsucker, and he ended up getting the knockout win. You look at a guy like Justin Tafa, and the thing that he does really well is undervalued in MMA. Now, Dan Tom got me onto this, and all of a sudden it was like a switch in my brain. Justin Tafa, in all 6 of his UFC fights, 64 of his 180 significant strikes landed are body shots. And in the 2 losses that he has that aren't the knockout loss against Jorgen de Castro, 32 shots and 28 shots to the body against Felipe and Van
That's
Derek.
because they just put their heads together and threw boxing combinations.
32 of 74 strikes and 28 of 77. Justin Tafa lands a heavy preponderance of body shots. And against a guy like Austen Lane, who's going to be headhunting, we'll see how that plays out. Because if you're ducking, if you're making any sudden movements to go to the body, Lane can catch you on the way in with those kicks, with those really long hooks that he has. Now, who has a speed advantage? I have a tough time saying it in this one.
Well,
I
it
honestly
depends on
do.
the range, really. If Lane can stay on the outside, he's just going to be able to the one who can pepper Tafa a little bit easier. But on the inside, I do think Tafa, even though he throws those big looping shots, they're going to be enough to land.
It'll be interesting to see what we get nonetheless. And the big thing when I look at a guy like Austen Lane, you watch a guy that throws so much fury, so much power at you, but he's not like one of the upper echelon guys at heavyweight. He's like one of them, but he's not like a Francis Ngannou or a Derek Lewis, somebody that's going to plant their feet and throw that big power shot. Lane's going to throw it, but he might be off balance on his front foot. He might be off balance on his back foot. And if he misses, you're out of position. You get countered. You get knocked out. If you land, you look like Jairzinho Rosenstrike, and then you make your way all the way up to the top 5. So Austen Lane, it could be a very interesting career path. He makes his debut at 35, so a little long in the tooth, but it is still heavyweight. And if you look at it for Justin Tafa, an accredited striker nonetheless, and he is the younger man in the matchup. We'll see how the weigh-ins make out for both guys, because one guy's missed the heavyweight limit. So if you consider it, Tafa is a slight favorite. We have a look at the Tapology vote. Surprised us there to you. I'm going to say over under 70% Tafa.
I'll say over.
Defending his brother's honor. It is over 632 total votes, 80% Tafa, 91% by knockout for the 20% that have Lane, 70% by knockout. I would be surprised if it didn't end by knockout.
So would I. If we get some terrible third round out of this fight, though, I wouldn't be surprised either. I do agree with where the Tapology voters are set on this fight, though. I do like Tafa. I think it'll probably end inside the distance either way, though, so maybe Tafa could get clipped by a big power shot. I just think if he's able to really establish his distance on the inside, his body shots, his head combinations, I know it leaves him open for some shots himself, but I think he'll be able to weather some of those early ones and land his own power shots as a result.
MMA math, put the tinfoil hat on. Austen Lane, 4-round cardio against the Kraken,
Wow.
Juan Adams, whereas Justin Tafa on a pay-per-view main card knocked out Juan Adams in the hometown of Houston. So I do have Justin Tafa in the matchup. I think he's going to be able to get it done with the striking. But again, this is a 50-50 coin flip of a heavyweight fight, and you're not wrong until Saturday night. So let us know who you have in the matchup. With low confidence going with the bad man, Justin Tafa, looking to snap that streak and get a big-time win. These two guys are on respective win streaks, but I'm bad at picking Tafa fights. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night picks throughout the week, because Emmett's taking on Topuria in the main event. Again, keep it locked in with Fight Night picks. We always say, let's get into it. Cross your fingers, cross your toes, say a prayer to the MMA gods. Coming up this weekend, all things considered, we hope that we get the return of Zhalgas Zhumagulov taking on the debuting, the fearless Joshua Van, the former Fury FC flyweight champ, 21 years old and the first fighter to make it to the UFC representing Myanmar. If you look at a matchup like this, Matt, Van representing Houston, Texas, 4-ounce fight club with Daniel Pineda, with some big-time fighters over there. And if you look at this one, Matt, I mean, for Zhumagulov, I queued up the hair on question mark kicks last weekend. A lot to look forward to on that card. A lot of fun fights on that one. There's 14 total right now, but the biggest fight that you should look forward to,
You look like Tobey Maguire when he got the Venom suit.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Zhalgas
I'm so
Zhumagulov
uncomfortable right now.
is fighting the fearless Joshua Van. So a big time fight. All my Zhumagulov fans, stand up. Everybody's excited about it.
Wow. All my Zhumaguls.
But for Zhumagulov, he has changed the hairstyle, but he has been on the wrong end of fighters dropping out of fights. He's supposed to fight Nate Maness. Maness is out. He's supposed to fight Estevam. Estevam out. He's supposed to fight Felipe Bunis last week. Bunis signing the poster. Somebody bought a signed Felipe Bunis poster from UFC Fight Night Vittori versus Cannonier. Bunis throws it out there on his Instagram and his Twitter, out due to a little bit of the drug testing issue. So Zhumagulov, now all of a sudden, the Estevam fight, he can't wait for it. The Buenos fight, he cut weight for it. Now he's got to cut weight again, another week removed, against Joshua Van. They have this listed as a flyweight fight. I'll be interested to see where it's at, because I know with Van his last time out, the commentary team, when he won his belt against McLean, said he looks like he's added a lot of size. He is kind of a small guy at flyweight. I know he's got a height advantage, but he's not necessarily the biggest guy at
21
flyweight.
though, he can grow.
But when you look at a guy like Van, I know MMA fans are very excited about him, and as am I. It's going to be a really interesting fight, because for Zhumagulov, Estevam, Buenos, and now Van, they all kind of fight in different ways. It's hard to get ready for a fight like this on short notice.
And this is the other thing I want to bring up about Zhumagulov. Not only the weight cut that's really important, what about the mindset of like, hey, I'm getting ready for it. You've got all this anxiety, you're getting ready for the fight that doesn't happen. Then you get ready for another one, doesn't happen.
I think a guy that has that many love interests has zero anxiety about anything.
I don't know. At 14-8, he probably does about his job security at this point, because this is an oddly specific and oddly important fight for a guy like Zhumagulov. We've talked about his career at length throughout this UFC tenure. He has one of the great 1-4 UFC runs that you will ever see, because he is a great sophomore test for a debut guy in the UFC, and I think that's where I'm going to get to a little bit more with this prediction. What does Zhalgas Zhumagulov do well? Well, he's pretty well-rounded, right? He's a very good pressure fighter. He makes you uncomfortable, and if you do have a lot of those question marks in your gas tank and whether or not you can deal with the pressure, we are going to see you get tired and start to fold as the fight continues. Well, Zhumagulov, against most guys in their debut, is probably going to be able to have some of that success with his physicality. That's why I say I think he's a really good sophomore test. I think guys coming into the UFC, if they do look really good in that debut, then you could fight a guy like Zhumagulov and really solidify your spot in the division.
So 1-5 in the UFC is Zhalgas Zhumagulov, 14-8 the total record. I said it last week, I'll say it again. Ali Bagwatinov probably has to get read bedtime stories, because he has nightmares about Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Zhumagulov 2-0 over Bagwatinov, a win over Tagir Ulanbekov with Fight Nights Global, a win over Tyson Nam with Fight Nights Global. The former Fight Nights Global champ is Zhumagulov, but again, we talked about it ad nauseum in the record, but a chintzy loss to Halion Paiva. He has the finished loss to Manel Kopp. He also has a loss to Amir Albazi, where he looked good in the first round, but Albazi took over as the fight went on. He beat Jerome Rivera out of the UFC, a split decision loss to Jeff Molina that Zhumagulov should have won, and a split decision loss to Charles Johnson that Zhumagulov should have won. Jeff Molina fight, 30-27, Anthony Maness. Modestas Bukauskas, Zach Paunga, 30-27.
That fight was pretty close, I gotta be honest.
But if you look at it for Zhumagulov, all of a sudden you're taking on Joshua Van. The biggest things, the pressure, we haven't really seen the success of the wrestling in the UFC, but it's a left hook to the body, an overhand right, and a leg kick from Zhumagulov, and he pressures. When you get him on the back foot, he can get hit, he can get wobbled, and we'll see if Joshua Van can do that. And I've really liked, again, this run that Joshua Van's gone on with Fury. All of his amateur and pro career with Fury FC, he has the one loss by submission to a really good prospect not that long ago, back in 2021 against Devon Jackson. But if you look at it for Van, this guy's really interesting. Now, when he's on the forefoot, does he throw a lot of combinations? Not really. He throws a lot of jabs. He'll throw a nice right hand. He has a really nice leg kick that wobbles some of his opponents. Going back and watching the tape on Van, though, I've seen people shout it from the rooftops on Twitter that Joshua Van is that guy. I don't know if he's that guy, guys. I really don't. I've watched so much friggin' fight tape to get ready for Zhumagulov fights. Van is last time out. He's taking on one 17-9 Cleveland McLean. 17-9's a great record. Cleveland McLean 17-9 isn't every 17-9.
At 21, though, when you're only 7-1, I think it is a good fight to have.
McLean wins the first round of that one, and Van rallies back, wins the second round. He ends up wobbling McLean. It looks like he breaks his nose because McLean's kind of pawing at it. Jumps from the back for the standing rear naked choke, and he gets the submission win. He's taken on Paris Moran before that, almost a year ago. In that one, Moran wins the first round, out-grapples Van. Moran's a striker. And then in the second round, it was a wild blitz of a finish by Joshua Van. The win before that over Mario Suazo, he ends up getting a calf slicer like he's Brett Johns. But he rallied back in that fight. And Souza was 2-1. And Souza's wins, the two wins, over an 0-1 fighter and an 0-5 fighter. And before those fights, Joshua Van's level competition, not great as a pro, but again, I get it. He is 21 years old now. He comes in as an amateur, as a pro, as a very young man. The skills off the charts, like if you just look at them on the paper, but it's really bringing them together in these fights. He can get pressured back and held against the cage. He's got a great move to get the underhook and shuck off his opponent. I really like that out of Joshua Van. He makes guys pay when it's on the ground. Again, I struggle with the fight IQ in some of these. He's a young guy. I get it. But Van's last time out against McLaren, he's in a really good position. And then all of a sudden he jumps down and goes for like a knee bar.
And he is much more submission over position. That'll be a big issue.
Standing to the leg, and then he gets back up and he finds himself back against the fence. And he smiles because he knows he made a mistake. And he is, again, 7-1. I'm nitpicking at this point. But it is tricky. I mean, he's a guy that'll walk out to Is You Ready by Migos. I don't like that song. They say Is You Ready so many times, and it's in too many commercials. But again, I look at this fight, Matt. So many people are hyped up on Joshua Van, and I picked Felipe Bunis last week to beat Zhumagulov that we didn't get. So I have a bit of a tricky time trying to make a pick on the fight.
If you want to know my pick slightly earlier than everybody else, go back and watch our Jim Miller fight. My prediction the last time he fought.
Matt, in the matchup, Zhumagulov is a slight favorite. We have a look at the Topology vote. Surprise us there to you. I think the fan's going to be Van or on Van because I've seen all that hype. So I'm going to say over-under 62.5% Van. Under? And it is the opposite, but it's still close. 327 total votes. Again, this fight on 9 days' notice for Joshua Van. 61% with Zhumagulov, 84% by decision. For the 39% that have Van, we have 51% by knockout. I think Zhumagulov gets the win in this matchup because of what I've seen from Van. He drops his he drops his left arm when guys go for overhand rights. And I've seen that he has a good chin. Zhumagulov throws big overhand rights. His right elbow doesn't drop down low enough when guys throw the left hook to the body. Zhumagulov throws that a lot. He struggles with pressure. Zhumagulov pressures a lot. For those reasons, I think Zhumagulov gets the win in this matchup. But again, I could be on...
Did Josh Van leave you a mean comment one time?
No. But I could be... It's like...
really nitpicking.
What's Adam... it's not Adam Schefter. The guy that's... Adam Shine?
You're on your own on this one.
That's on Sirius Radio where he says you're on Planet Delusional. I could be on Planet Delusional on this matchup, but
this is more like a Sunday roast situation. You were really going at it with Van there. I think Van can have a lot of success with his game off his back. He is squirrely with his submission game, and he's a very quick grappler. I know he will jump positions to try to go for submissions, but if he really is able to use some of that size to wrap up a guy like Zhumagulov, I think he can get him into some difficult positions. I'm not predicting he's going to choke him out against the cage like he's Charles Oliveira against Will Brooks, but I do think he can have some success in some of those unorthodox positions, but I overall do agree with you. I do have Zhumagulov in this fight.
Well, the blitzes, the head kicks out of a guy like Van, he doesn't necessarily cut the cage, but when he will throw that right hook out there to cut the cage, it lands with great effect. And again, that gym that he's training out of, Rafael Alves out of that gym now, as well as Daniel Pineda, they're going to get you ready for a fight like this, even if it is on 9 days' notice. A guy represented by Iridium is Joshua Van. Matt, both of us going with Zhalgas Zhumagulov in this matchup. Maybe on Saturday I'll just do the hair regularly. We'll see how it plays out in this one. But a big-time matchup in a big-time flyweight division. Featherweight in the marquee of Josh Emmett taking on Ilia Topuria. You are not going to want to miss that. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it. Two of the biggest welterweights in the UFC we have coming up this weekend. The Haitian sensation, Neil Magny, looking to get back to winning ways. He was finished in the first round his last time out against another South Floridian. We're talking Gilbert Burns' brother in the first round. He's taking on the South Florida base, former Brooklyn man. It's the Fresh Prince, Philip Rowe, who's coming on a string of 3 wins. And he's looked very impressive in those 3 wins. He beats Jason Witt. He looked good against Orion Kosi. He looked good against Nico Price. If you just look at the wins and numbers on a page, Matt, Phil Rowe has taken a ton of punishment in those 3 fights. Orion Kosi in the first round, it was rough. The fight that he had against Jason Witt, the takedowns. The fight that he had his last time out against Nico Price. Phil Rowe got beaten to a pulp for 12 minutes. And Nico Price drops Rowe in the 3rd round. Gets into mount. They get back up. Price has got nothing left in the tank, and Phil Rowe starts to pull away. Now, Rowe missed weight in that fight. You see that on screen, 173.5. He missed weight in his fight against, it was Orion Kosi at 173.5 as well. So Rowe's had a tough time on the scale. Neil Magny has had 29 fights in the UFC, and he himself has never missed weight.
Neil Magny, to me, though, at this point in his career, is like an old manual shift car. You know, if you're really good at it and you can get a rhythm going, he's really difficult to stop, and he's going to work out out great for you. But if you don't know what you're doing, if you're stalling every 2 seconds, it's not going to look great. And for Neil Magny, he's always been a phenomenal, well-rounded fighter, right? He can strike. He has good offensive wrestling. We've seen the jiu-jitsu in some parts of his fights, even though we have seen him struggle in some of those positions too. But at the height of his career, he was like a 90, an 85 out of 100 in a lot of those skills. But I do feel like as he has continued to fight guys at the top of the division, that's the thing that has to be said about Neil Magny. I know his record now is 27-10, but he has only fought some of the great fighters in the welterweight division for the whole time he has been in the UFC, and I do think he has to be given that respect. But at what point of his career is he still at? Because Magny at one point was fighting Kelvin Gastelum in main events. He fought Santiago Ponzinibbio in the main event. Like, he has been at the top of the mountain per se. I know he hasn't won the title, but you get the idea. He has been sort of that A-list star of a welterweight division. Now he's fighting Philip Rowe. Well, he's fought in a lot of main events. He fought Michael Chiesa in a main event. You don't get that many main event slots if you're just some random guy.
You're putting him into a category where he should be in the Phil Davis category. Babe, I'm canceling my plans. A-side Neil Magny.
Neil Magny has fought in a lot more high-profile fights, especially as of late, than a guy like Phil. Than who?
Phil Davis.
Phil Davis. No one has ever wanted to watch a Phil Davis fight. He's good, but he's so boring. Neil Magny, though, has been in very high-profile fights.
You're telling me the all-time UFC decision wins leader gets people out of their seats.
What I'm saying is Neil Magny's had good fights. The Hector Lombard fight was really good. Like, he's been in a lot of good fights. Kelvin Gastelum was a great 5-round main event fight. I can name a ton of great Neil Magny fights. You gotta stop nitpicking all the time. For Phil Rowe, though, I think he can make Neil Magny really uncomfortable on the back foot. Now, to be said, Neil Magny can get uncomfortable on the back foot against a lot of fighters, and that's why I bring up the manual shift car analogy. When he's able to get into a rhythm, really forcing the action, throwing that jab out there and keeping his opponent at range, Neil Magny is a difficult puzzle to solve.
Neil Magny in his fight against Max Griffin was troubling, to say the least, because every time you get hit by Griffin, giant negative reaction. Same thing when he fought Shavkat Rakhmonov. And if you look at it for Magny, out of his last 3 wins, his second to last time out, he's taking on Daniel Rodrigues. Tapology voters, almost 4,000 of them, 60% had D-Rod. Before that, the Jeff Neal fight, a little over 3,000 votes, 66% on Neal. So Magny's come through as an underdog in these spots of late. He loses against Gilbert Burns, gets taken down, and it was the same kind of finish that Dos Anjos was able to get against them, that triangle choke win and an easy takedown attempt on a single leg. If you look at it for Magny against Shavkat, it's a little bit different, but Phil Rowe's one of those guys where he's got a jiu-jitsu black belt. You see that on his Instagram. He's been competing at grappling tournaments recently. He struggled against the pressure of a guy like Gabe Green. He struggled in the grappling in some of his matchups. He's been dropped, but he gets back up, like his fight against Shabazian that he had on Contender Series. Phil Rowe's an anomaly to me, and I know he hates Fight Night picks, just like Brennan Allen, a couple of Florida-based guys that don't like this channel because they watch the videos. But if you look at it for a guy like Phil Rowe, half an inch of a reach advantage. The two guys should be similar in height. Phil Rowe has had his hair in cornrows recently, so you won't see a little bit of a height advantage with the fade. But when it comes down to a matchup like this, I saw Phil Rowe take a ton of punishment his last time out against double knee wrap, double knee tap Nico Price.
Neil Magny takes some damage in his career too, to be completely fair though.
Down in Orlando, so both guys rallying points for sure. Neil Magny closer to 36 than he is 35. Phil Rowe closer to 33 than he is 32. So a little bit interesting that way. Both guys have had wild careers. Magny, as I referenced, the decision wins leader in the UFC. He's also tied for 9th all-time in wins in the UFC with 20, and he's also 8th all-time in significant strikes landed at 2,255. So some wild stuff right there. We have a look at the odds. Magny is slightly favored. We have a look at the Tapology votes. Matt, surprised us they are to you. I think they're going to be close, but I'm going to say 60% Magny in this one.
I think it'll be over because he's the much more well-known commodity.
That's way over. That is a surprise to me. 648 total votes, 77% Magny, 85% by decision. For the 23% that have Rowe, 68% by knockout. Now, Rowe, again, he's won 3 fights in a row. He's finished 3 fights, and 2 of those 3 he has missed weight, so we'll see how that plays out. But it's a little bit more of a hometown feel because he trains down in the Miami area. This one in northern Florida in Jacksonville. I don't have any issues with Magny making the weight, or I don't see any big issues. 29 fights, it's never been a thing. I have Neil Magny with the work rate in this one, but it's a tricky fight if you do consider it.
We're going to be split on it, I guess. I'm going to go with the underdog in Phil Rowe. I think he can make it uncomfortable for Neil Magny on the inside. But again, this fight to me is going to be judged by whoever's moving forward is probably going to win it. If Neil Magny is able to move forward with some of those long-range kicks, it's absurd how far away he can hit his opponent from. We talk about a lot of fighters who don't fight with their range. Neil Magny's one of those guys who can be the two versions, right? He can get backed up behind those two black lines and he won't look great. But when he's the guy moving forward, flicking that jab out there, being the aggressive of the two, I think he has surprising punching power in his game.
That's why I don't have Phil Rowe, because Phil Rowe has this giant reach, but he doesn't use it in his fights. He doesn't fight behind a jab. He can throw a really nice overhand right, but he tends to play out in the pocket, and he does struggle against some of these other strikers. He struggles with guys at range. So I have Neil Magny in this one, Matt. You are going with the Fresh Prince, Philip Rowe in the matchup. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. The Fight Night Picks fans, they like Philly Fresh. They're not so hot on Neil Magny. Some big time fights left on this card, including the next one between the aforementioned Brendan Allen. He's going to be taking on Bruno Silva. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Brendan Allen was originally due his first main event since he was with the LFA back in 2019, and that was supposed to be this month against Jack Hermansson, but almost as soon as it was announced, it was gone. It fizzled away. And so on May the 1st, it was announced that Bruno Silva would be stepping in to take on Brendan Allen in a 3-round atmosphere. So pretty well a full camp for both of these guys. Get ready for it. And for Bruno Silva, wiped away all of those worries that you had about him when he fought Gerald Meerschaert 2 fights ago and looked absolutely gassed and terrible when he showed up with a goatee and no hair on top of his head. He tried to look like Brazilian Walter White, and he looked like he took Brazilian Walter White stuff because he looked terrible in that matchup. In the 3rd round, he gets dropped by a right hand. He gets submitted, and it's an awful ending for Bruno Silva. So many people down on him coming into the fight against Brad Tavares, where he showed up to show out and got the 1st-round knockout win over Tavares. So now, all of a sudden, Brendan Allen putting his shiny record, his shiny ranking on the line, a 4-fight win streak for Allen. And if you consider it in this matchup, I mean, Bruno Silva's one of those guys. Can he strike in a little bit of a Dricus du Plessis blitz like he did against Jordan Wright? He could. Can he be the reserve guy? He could. But Silva's last time out against Brad Tavares started the fight out of southpaw, which is interesting because Brendan Allen in the UFC is 7-0 against southpaws. Some people might not think about that one. 7-0 against lefties. Silva typically an orthodox fighter, and I would hazard a guess to say that Silva fights out of orthodox to start this one. But when you look at this fight, Matt, Silva's good on the ground. We don't see it that often. We saw it against Wellington Turman, who's also on this card, so that's got to be awkward when they see each other in the halls this week. But for Silva, he gets his bread buttered with his striking. For Brendan Allen, was known as a grappler, but his striking's progressed so well at Killcliff. You've seen it really level up as things have gone on. And in his last time out in an impromptu main event against Andrea Muniz, because Nikita Krylov couldn't make the walk against Ryan Spann, Brendan Allen looked amazing in that fight, was really able to defend takedowns, work in his grappling, work in his striking, and get the finish win over Muniz. And it was one of those ones where Muniz submitted Jacare, and Allen submitted Muniz. So is now Allen the grappling king of 185 pounds?
It's not how sports work, but it is fun to think about it like that. And that's been the thing about Brendan Allen. Like, you're right. The grappling, the wrestling is what got him to the dance. He was one of those original kind of gained a lot of stock in a loss when he first came into the UFC because he did pretty well against Kyle Dawkins. Or other way around, sorry. Kyle Dawkins did surprisingly well against him. But that was the thing about Brendan Allen. He has got into some of those 50-50 grappling exchanges against guys like Kevin Holland, even though he was able to win out. But for Allen, he's so physically strong in some of those positions. That's why I'll be curious to see where and when Silva can have success with his own grappling, because Silva's a guy who does really good with his defensive submissions, right? He's got a great guillotine. He can do really well with some of those spots, and those are things that make Brendan Allen uncomfortable. Allen's at his best, like you said, when he's fighting like he did against Andrea Muniz, when he's mixing his boxing in with his wrestling, with his own grappling. When he is an MMA fighter, there are few guys who can mix their martial arts as well as he does in the middleweight division, but Bruno Silva is such an outlier with some of his strikes. He could land a massive strike at any point of this fight and hurt a guy like Brendan Allen. But the biggest gain I do think Allen's made in his striking since going to Killcliff isn't just his overall striking. It's the kicks to the body. He throws great body kicks now, and I do think they help him open up a large portion of his game, because at first it was good boxing, good wrestling. Now he has a bit more of an answer at that middle range, at that long range, and I do think it's really helped him open up his game.
Good cardio for Brendan Allen. Questionable cardio for Bruno Silva, because you saw him be the hammer for 2 rounds against PFL's El Dierte Andrew Sanchez, former Ultimate Fighter winner. winner. And then Silva rallies back in the third round. Both guys are tired, but Silva ends up throwing that good combination. Crazy
Carries
flurry.
his power late.
Gets the knockout win. So for Bruno Silva in this one, it'll be interesting to see which version we get. I do hazard to guess, or I do think that was an anomaly that we saw against Meerschaert, because a lot of people said that Pereira took the soul of Silva, and that's what we saw, but that wasn't really the case. So I disagree with folks out there. When it comes down to this matchup, Matt, Allen is slightly favored in the matchup. We have picked him in some fights. We picked against him in some fights, but he's won more than he's lost with the UFC. Have a look at the Tapology votes to get a look at what the fans are thinking on this one. I'm going to say over under 70% Allen in the matchup.
I'll say over.
I'm going to say over, and it is over. So 670 total votes, 81% Allen, 68% by submission for the 19% that have Silva, 87% by knockout. And again, we've seen Allen struggle when he fought against Chris Curtis. We saw him struggle when he fought against Sean Strickland as well, the Extreme Couture guys. Can Bruno Silva carry things over with the striking that way? We'll find out if he's able to clip with some of those shots. Allen looked good against Curtis at the start. He really did struggle in the back foot when he was fighting Sean Strickland. And Silva's one of those pressure type of fighters. We're meeting chest to chest and we're throwing down. So I think this is going to be a really fun fight. And a tough one to offer up a pick on for me.
Just because, again, Silva's one of these fighters who can end the fight at any moment. But I got to be honest, that Meerschaert fight, it might be an anomaly, but it still happened. You know? Like, that doesn't happen to every fighter where they get dropped by a guy who's not this great striker, who's not really even in his prime anymore. Like, that's a bad loss. Even if you don't want to buy all the way into it, it still happened and you still have to bring it up. So for Silva, if Meerschaert can do it, I do think Brendan Allen can hurt him on the feet. I don't think Brendan Allen's not going to be able to do that at all. I picked against Brendan Allen against Andrea Muniz, though, and I was really impressed by his overall game plan that time out. I thought he was really able to mix all of his skill set together. I think he'll be able to do the same in this one.
I like Allen in this one because of the fight that I referenced earlier, the Andrew Sanchez fight, where it was a lot of the wrestling that had success. Now, that's a JUCO All-American. That's a guy that ended up training at TriStar in Canada. It's pretty cool there for Andrew Sanchez. The PFL run, not very good. But if you look at it for Allen, I like that. I like the kicks to the body. I like the fact that he has the attacks that can slow down a guy like Silva. But if you remember Bruno Silva, I mean, he was supposed to come into the UFC. Some USADA complications before he did. But go watch his fight against Artem Frolov, who I thought was all the hotness and was going to be in the UFC at some point. So Matt, both of us in the matchup going with all in Brendan Allen to pick up the win. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have in this matchup. And if we look forward, Matt, David Onama's fighting Gabriel Santos next. You are not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it. Big time featherweight fight coming up this weekend. We have a couple of guys that did something in losses their last times out. We have the silent assassin, David Onama, taking on Mosquetino. It's Gabriel Santos. And when you look at this matchup, Matt, I mean, for Onama, he was undefeated as an amateur. He was undefeated as a pro coming into the UFC. Had a wild fight of the night style fight in his debut against the now returning Cage Warriors former double champ Mason Jones. He parlayed that forward to 2 giant wins. One over another Gabriel. So, I mean, you beat Gabriel Benitez. That's got to mean something. And then Onama goes out there his next time out and he beats Garrett Armfield on short notice in a rematch from their amateur days. But Onama's last time out nearly finishes Nate Landwehr in the first round, gets 10-8'd in the second round, and then had a close third round in that one. He ends up losing. It's a majority decision, a 28-28, and then, of course, 2 29-27s in favor of Landwehr. So Onama, he's been off for a long time, can no longer train in Kansas City. So he's got a new camp, and it's Factory X Muay Thai. And I'll throw it up there on his Instagram, awarded the Factory X Sparring of the Week, or Sparring Fighter of the Week in the gym there. So interesting to see from David Onama. But you see him featured prominently on a lot of those fighters' Instagrams. And if we look at a matchup like this, Matt, Gabriel Santos came in on incredibly short notice. He replaced a big-time fighter to take on Lerone Murphy, and we touched on a lot of the former LFA champ's triumphs as a pro because he was also undefeated coming into the UFC. So let's throw it on over to a video for Gabriel Santos. Gabriel Santos is one of those prospects that got that shot. He took on Marcio Barboza. He won that fight by knockout in the second round, not without withstanding a ton of adversity in that one. And his last time out as a big underdog in the tournament finale, beats Jose Delano and finishes him. And boy, did he look amazing for all of that fight. He looked really, really good in that one.
I love the offense of Santos. Like, it really is some high IQ striking. It's not a guy who's just going out there throwing bombs.
But does he switch stances? Oh, he switches stances.
Does he? Can Mookie Betts hit? You tell me. And that's the fun thing about Santos. Again, he's not just a guy like, again, we all appreciate a guy like Vanderlei Silva who goes out there, eats some bombs, and throws a lot of hooks and knocks guys out. But Santos does have a lot of speed behind his technique. It is fun to watch because he does fight very similar from his orthodox and southpaw positions. Although a few more kicks from that orthodox position. He's a little bit more right leg dominant, I guess, with his power kicks. But I really do enjoy his boxing combinations. I like that he can throw out some feeler shots. We talk about Veronica Hardy earlier on the card. Shout out to her current husband, Dan Hardy, because he's the one who broke this down, and it just made sense to me. He's like, hey, I am a guy who, like, he has his black belt in jiu-jitsu. He is a good grappler, don't get me wrong, but he can admit that, hey, grappling's like a secondary art form to me, you know? I have to think about it, and then I can do the action. Whereas with striking, I can just kind of flow with my striking. It comes natural to me. And for Gabriel Santos, when he can flow with his striking, he's a very dominant fighter. You're bringing him back to a pretty difficult matchup on short notice. You bring it up only 8 days' notice to fight Gabriel Santos, who is a
Santos isn't on the short notice.
Sorry. Santos the one in short notice, but he's a dangerous fighter nonetheless. Again, he's got the hand speed, he's got the power, he can get on the inside and the outside.
So you can play MMA math with this one in a circle and it gets really weird.
7 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Elvis Brenner fought Zubair Tukhugov in the undercard of the pay-per-view in Perth, and it was really weird because everyone and their dog, and maybe even cat that watched that fight, thought that Zubair Tukhugov won. The judges gave it to Elvis Brenner and all of us were shocked, but Brenner beats Tukhugov. Lauren Murphy drew with Tukhugov. Gabriel Santos beat Elvis Brenner. Judges scorecards 28-27, 28-27, 29-28. I watched the fight again today. I don't know how they ended up with 28-27s, but he says, what, Vence oit? Which is 28 and then 27. So it weirded me out, and I even Google translated it to make sure I heard it correctly. But when I watch those fights, Gabriel Santos, Elvis Brenner, Santos fights a lot more out of orthodox. Santos is able to win the first round, in my opinion. He loses the second round. He gets taken down and held down a little bit. I thought he won the third round, but his cardio wasn't really on the level. His output was kind of all over the place.
Yeah, the output's the thing he struggles with.
Gabriel, his next time out, beats Elvis Silva, and Gabriel at these times, he's a future FC featherweight champ. Then he goes out there and fights Marcio Barboza over with the LFA. And in that fight, it was really weird because in the first round, quick takedown entry, he throws a spinning back kick and he whiffs. And then when he whiffs on it, it's weird because, spinning back fist, he eats a left hook and he gets dropped. And Barboza drops Santos. And then Santos is trying to kind of clear the cobwebs and get back up. He gets a legal knee.
He does.
But the referee, Osiris Maya, doesn't really see it. So out of that first round, Santos, if you called it a 10-8 for Barboza, I wouldn't be mad at all. Santos is up, he's down throughout the round, he's completely rocked. And then he comes back in the next one. He's so wobbly in his striking. He lands a spinning kick, he lands a head kick, he gets the ground and pound done. Santos looks really good, but his coming out performance was his last fight. Against Delano, Santos a big underdog. He comes out of that fight, switching his stances a lot, but mainly from southpaw, mixing his boxing combinations, going to the head when Delano's up, and then really hitting.
Did that last fight make you change your opinion of him and what his overall ceiling could be? Because it did for me. Because again, I had done the tape study. I looked through a lot of his fights. The positives were there, but the negatives were also there. But watching his last fight, not that it erases a lot of the difficulties we had seen throughout him, but it did make me have a lot more confidence in him making his debut.
So over Santos, he comes into this matchup out of Atos BJJ in Rio. You know, him training and peaking at the same time as his I guess a fellow gym member in Raoni Barcelos. Now, for Raoni, you don't get the fight against Miles Johns. That sucks. But for Santos, great partners there. I mean, you know a guy that's in a coaching role at that gym, and Davi Hamos as well. Gabriel Santos, I've seen him draw. I've seen him rocked in fights. I've seen him struggle with takedowns. But the same can be said for David Onama. So this is an extremely volatile fight at featherweight for these two guys.
It definitely is. And I'm going to raise my hand and admit one of the worst predictions I ever had just in life. I thought Dante Exum was going to be awesome. I thought David Onama was going to be really good coming into the UFC too. And I don't want to say he hasn't met my expectations, because if you look at the fighters he lost to, well, there's decent caveats there, right? A close fight against Nate Landwehr, who's a very talented fighter in his own right.
Onama struggled with the wrestling as the fight went going on.
Oh, don't you worry. And against with the Mason Jones fight, he really struggled with the pressure of Jones. Now, he was able to land his own strikes when Mason Jones was able to get on the inside and meet him with power strikes, but the pressure that both those guys brought into the cage was what really gave David Onama troubles in his matchups. Now, you bring up the wrestling. Yes, they were able to implement that, but I just think the fact that them closing the distance was able to open up the majority of their games. Onama's an interesting striker because of how talented he is at the long range. We know how good his kicks are. He's got a very snappy straight left too, but he does need kind of a specific Goldilocks zone to land those big power shots, and if he's not able to use his footwork to really maintain his distance and keep his back off the cage, he can get caught in kind of stagnant positions, and I do worry about that in this matchup.
And if you do consider this again, Santos comes in on extremely short notice, fights Lerone Murphy.
A good fighter.
If you look at that one, MMA decision, 16, 29, 28 Santos, 130, 27 Santos, 2, 29, 28 Murphys. The golden buzzer from Sean Sheehan being a Murphy scorecard, but it ends up being a split decision win for Lerone Murphy in that one. But Gabriel Santos looked really good with the striking in that matchup, really snappy, really crisp. And if you consider it in a fight like this, both guys have glaring weaknesses. Both guys have glaring, like, 5-star attributes if you're playing 2K. So when you look at a matchup like this, my socks were knocked off when I found out that Santos was a 2-1 favorite in the fight, because I thought that things were going to be pretty close. Being the fact that Onama, the former Fury guy, the fact that he has a few UFC wins, a performance bonus win where he throws a 9-punch combo to knock out Gabriel Benitez.
He's had very memorable fights.
After he got clipped in that one and rocked because he was pawing in his eye. We have a look at the Tapology votes. I think this is going to level out a little bit because one guy's a fan favorite and one guy's a little bit of a lesser known commodity. I'm going to say over under 60% Onama.
I think Santos will be the favorite.
Santos is the favorite. 619 total votes, 67% Santos, 70% by decision. For the 33% that have Onama, 46% by decision, 44% by knockout. So Matt, what's the pick in the fight?
I'm going to say Santos, but he's probably going to walk into range, eat one big shot, and get absolutely flatlined. I just think Santos is going to be able to make use of that distance management. Again, Onama's not, he's like a buzzsaw. You got to walk into him, and you got to really make sure what you're doing. I'm thinking about, remember when Chris Angels did that thing where he had his hands tied, and he went into the wood chipper, and then he jumped out on the other side? That's what it's like to fight David Onama. You got to get close to the wood chipper.
Are you ready? I just made somebody really uncomfortable.
Exactly. But again, for David Onama, he's going to have all of those chances to land the big power shot. I just think for Onama, not that he can go a hard 3 rounds, I just think his game plan in this fight is going to be very tied to ending it inside the decision, where I think Santos is going to be able to go to the body, go to the head, and use his combinations a little bit more effectively.
Chris Angel like Zhalgas Zhumagulov, what's better, short hair, long hair?
I think those guys would be better friends than anyone would ever assume.
Somebody would write a novel and start it off first sentence. They became fast friends. Chris Angel, Zhalgas Zhumagulov.
And Zhalgas emerged from the crowd.
I think David Onama can make Gabriel Santos pay. And I was so high on Santos. I picked him to beat Lerone Murphy. I thought he beat Lerone Murphy. He looked great in that debut. He has that win over Elvis Brenner that all of a sudden ages really well in a really close fight that they had. But Santos is cut from the same cloth as Onama. Good wrestling offensively, not great wrestling defensively. And Brenner, we talked about it to start this video. He's fighting Guram Kutataladze on Canada Day, July 1st. So UFC, they don't take days off. They don't. Matt, both of us split on the pick. I'm going with the silent assassin, David Onama. I think he can make Santos pay on those entries. But Santos, with that wrestling, with that jiu-jitsu, and with his own striking, he could make things interesting. Let us know down below in the comment section who you have in this matchup. Some big-time fights left on this card. The next one, Cody Brundage taking on SD, Cedricus Dumas. Matt, some big-time fights left on this one. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it. On 9 days' notice, representing Factory X Muay Thai, we have the short notice comeuppance for Cody Brundage replacing Puna Soriano in a matchup against the Reaper, SD Dumas. Matt, when you look at a fight like this, Cody Brundage hasn't won a fight in about a year. Cody Brundage has lost twice in a row by finish. Cody Brundage got finished about 2 months ago against Adolfo Vieira. And if you just look at results on a page, it's bad. But if you go back and you watch the fights, Cody Brundage dropped Adolfo Vieira. And the best part about that fight was we had a hair bet in that one. And I said that I would dye my hair blue if Cody Brundage shot for a takedown. And he didn't. But it ended up being the grappling that got him caught and submitted against Vieira nonetheless off of Vieira attempt. So when you look at a matchup like this, Matt, again, I realized why Cody Brundage jumped at the opportunity to replace Puna Soriano.
You know Dana White called him kid when he called about this fight. Hey kid, we need you.
Well, I would say McMahon probably called Brundage representatives and not Dana White. But when you look at it for Dumas, there's good things and there's bad things about this. Dumas is getting ready for Soriano. Brundage fights exactly like Soriano. If you look at it for Brundage, look what Dumas did in his last fight in his debut against Josh Fremd. That Yinzer looked pretty good against Dumas with his takedowns and his submission ability. And for Dumas, you know him off Contender Series where he ended up getting that standing guillotine like he was Emmanuel Sanchez. Was on a 5-fight losing streak and lost last week against Archie Colgan, who's very good. But Dumas got that win over Mate Peñas. And for Dumas, other than that, on the regional scene with the Jorge Masvidal promotions, really, really quick finishes, really wonky striking, really uses his range well, leaves himself out there a little bit to get countered. But Dumas was able to go out there against not really the greatest level competition and look amazing. And getting ready for this fight, Dumas training at Fusion XL, a little bit of that tap with Adolfo Vieira. So he has to have some, confidence in his own right getting ready for this one. The big reach advantage, a slight height advantage. If you look at it for Brundage, I mean, it's just an oil meets water type of fight.
It definitely is. And it's going to come down to how does Brundage use his pressure? Is he going to use his pressure to try to strike his way into the clinch to then go for takedowns? Because I think we're going to see a much more wrestling heavy version of Brundage because Dumas does do a good job of moving his feet and striking off of the back foot. But if Brundage can get him up against the cage, it'll really help him implement his own wrestling attack. But that's where it's going to come down to. How well is Brundage going to be able to not only hold Dumas down, but just avoid some of those... I don't think Dumas is going to be a big submission threat in this match, but if he can at least gain on the guillotine and make things uncomfortable for Brundage, I think Dumas is the vastly superior striker in this matchup. Now, he is going to have to watch out for some of those unorthodox parts of his game because he's going to leave himself open eventually against a guy who is going to be able to counter you better than Brundage. But if Brundage... I don't know, maybe he likes Tim Duncan. He was at a UFC event not that long ago. If he can be the big fundamental, though, and just keep the jab, keep his pressure, and stay in the face of a guy like Dumas, I could see him having success with his own game plan.
Who's the boxer now? Cody Brundage, the coming out party against Trayshawn Gore with the boxing. You saw him against Dalcio Lungiambula. Struggle with the distance management and have one of the craziest Hail Mary submission wins you're ever going to see in a matchup. Again, for Brundage's last 2 times out, he got finished by Lord Michael, but now it's Husar. There's Canadian Husars out there, but Lord Michael's one of the Polish. He gets the win there by finish, and then Brundage's last time out against Vieira, having all the success in the world. And then the rug got pulled out from under him, just like a Brundage fight against William Knight, where having all the success in the world, rug pulled out from under him. Brundage doesn't have a bad chin. Brundage doesn't have awful submission defense.
Featherweight Michael Johnson?
But he still gets finished. Nah, I don't know about that. But
when you look by Darren Elkins, get knocked out.
When you look at a matchup like this, it'll be interesting to see, again, which version of which guy we get. Because for Dumas, great at that long range, training at Port City Combat, training at home, as well as Fusion XL. Brundage at a factory Muay Thai. And we have seen a level up in the Brundage boxing since he moved from Michigan over to Colorado. We'll see how it plays out on, again, extremely short notice for Brundage, and for Dumas, fairly similar stylistic opponent. So Brundage slightly favored in this short notice play. If you have a look at Topology for the total votes, surprise that's there to you. I think the fans are going to see it pretty close, but maybe edge Brundage. I'm going to say over under 70% Brundage.
I'll say under.
I'm going to say under. Look at that. 314 total votes, 68% Brundage, 58 roughly percent by submission. For the 32% that have Dumas, 66% by the knockout. Who do you have in the matchup?
If it was on full training camp, I would have picked Brundage and not felt bad about it at all. But being the short notice nature of this fight, I'm a little bit concerned because I think Brundage is going to have a very elevated work rate to go out there and win this fight. It's not going to be enough to just stay in the face of a guy like Dumas. You've got to make use of that positioning too, because if he's just given time on the back foot to really set up some of his bigger power shots, I think he's going to be able to lead Brundage into something big. But I guess I'll go with Brundage. Short notice, full training camp. I like his skill set in this matchup, so I'll go with Brundage.
That's the trouble. We and a lot of other people are high on Dumas coming in to make that UFC debut against Josh Fremd. Fremd, a teammate of Cody Brundage, and it was kind of tricky going back, watching the tape, and really thinking about it. And I do have Brundage in the matchup, but again, it's unranked middleweights coming off a loss. One guy coming off of 2 finished losses.
Even ranked middleweights aren't great right now,
It's
guys.
a really, really tricky one. So be that as it may, Matt, both of us going with Cody Brundage to get the win and bring the win back to Factory X. A couple of Factory X fighters back-to-back in Onama and Brundage. And in the co-main event coming up, Maycee Barber at a Team Alpha Male taking on Hebos Academy's own Amanda Hebos. A big-time matchup in that co-main event that you're not going to want to miss. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it. Fight Night Picks co-main event coming up this weekend from Jacksonville. Amanda Hebos taking on the future Maycee Barber. I think that Amanda Hebos wins the decision like Alexa Grasso did against Maycee Barber, outstrikes her, and defends the takedowns and gets a win by decision in the co-main event. You like that video?
Can I add like 30 seconds of my own and then I'll get to the point very quick too. This is another really important fight in the career of Maycee Barber because you bring up that Grasso fight. That was her first kind of taste at fighting one of the elite fighters of the division. And I know Grasso at that point was not necessarily thought of what she is now, the champion of course, but still, stylistically, there are definitely some similarities between the two. I would say Grasso a little bit more heavy on the boxing than Hebos. She'll throw a few more kicks out there. But for Barber, and you bring it up, Jessica Ai, Andrea Lee, Montana De La Rosa, those are, not to be disrespectful, but all very common opponents and skill sets you can find not only inside the top 15 but outside the top 15. I like this because it's a unique skill set matchup. Amanda Hebos is a fighter who, if you pressure her very well, you can have success, something Barber has been able to do throughout her career. Barber has plus punching power, and we've seen Hebos get rocked, so I do think there is a path for Barber to follow to where she can get the win, but I do agree with you. I just think in the outset and for the outlier skills of the two of them, if Barber goes for takedowns like we have seen her do, I like Hebos on the mat quite a bit, and I don't say this often in fights. Hebos is a good enough grappler in this matchup to where maybe saying she can get a submission off her back might be a stretch too far, but I think she can have success off her back with her sweeps.
The last fight for Maycee Barber against Andrea Lee, a lot of grappling between the two of them. Some more takedowns for Barber, some more striking from Lee. You look at the judge's decision, Collazo scores round 1, round 2 for Barber. Chris Lee scores round 2, round 3 for Lee. Dan Merigliotto over the top rope. 30-27 Barber. One of the worst scorecards you're ever going to see.
Does Dan show up driving like a Lamborghini? And I'll just leave it at that.
No, I think he shows up with like an F-250 like that old commercial he was in.
I think... I'll just leave that. It
Matt, when you do look at this one, like for Maycee Barber, you consider the fights that she's had. That Alexa Grasso fight, it was on the heels of the Modafferi loss where she hurt her knee in that one. She is incredibly tough, is Maycee Barber. And in the Grasso fight, the thing that I really liked was she lost the first round, she lost the second round, she won the third round. She rallied really well in that one. And if you look at it for Hebos, the fight that she has against Marina Rodrigues, where she ends up getting finished and rocked, and Herb Dean has a bad stoppage, she comes back, she beats Vina Jandiroba, she then loses to Caitlin Chukagian by split decision, where she's taking on the #1 ranked flyweight, moving up to flyweight from strawweight. The last time out, you had Hebos beating Viviane Araujo, who throws a high propensity of strikes throughout all 3 rounds. That really happened. She didn't lose the second round. She had a good output as that one went on. But for Hebos, you look at it, the takedowns, Randa Marcos took her down once, and Vina Jandiroba took her down once. Those are the only 2 takedowns that Hebos has given up in the UFC. And I know, and we referenced this not that long ago in Hebos' last fight against Viviane Araujo. Remember her fight against Poliana Viana, where she gets rocked the same and she got rocked against one Marina Rodrigues, and Viana's going out there dropping her hands up like she's Patrick Roy in the playoffs for different reasons. So a big win there for Poliana Viana, but it is tricky for Hebos. She does get hit by right hands, and Barber throws a really big right hand. Team Alpha Male is definitely going to get you ready for a matchup like this. So I started the video off kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's not as cut and dry as that, but this is an interesting fight. And for Hebos, I mean, she has 2.3 million Instagram followers. Maycee Barber has 321,000, so both of them with a lot. Hebos with a ton.
But here's just a great... Dylan Cease, a guy who almost won the Cy Young, I just followed him on Instagram. He has like 42,000 followers, so they're not doing too bad, honestly.
We'll see. MMA fans are weird. We're going to have a look at the Topology votes, see what the fans are thinking. I'm going to say over under 70% Hebos in this one.
I think it'll be over. I think she'll be a heavy... Oh, no, way over.
687 total votes, 71% Hebos, 86% by decision for the 29% that are Barber, 80% by decision. For me, Hebos has a higher work rate, and that's why I think that we're going to see a higher propensity of strikes land for her against Barber on the outside. If Barber can crash that distance, chest to chest, head below head. She can work some of those good positions in the clinch, working her takedowns. Barber could have success in this one. Just for me, the 2014 IMMAF world champ, Hebos, I like the jiu-jitsu out of her as well. It's a lesser seen part of her game that I think can get her back up to her feet if she does get taken down. And I do like her striking. So I do have Hebos. But the Viana knockout, the Rodrigues knockout, they definitely weigh heavily on my mind in this one.
I've got Hebos in the matchup, but again, I do think Barber with her forward pressure can have some success in this matchup. I just don't know for how long she'll be able to sustain that matchup. And Hebos might go for her own offensive takedowns to really try to switch things up and get Macy Barber off her, because that's the big X factor of Barber's game. When she is aggressive, when she is doing that kind of boxing technique into her takedown attempts, a very effective fighter, I just don't think she's going to be able to have that level of success in this matchup.
Both of us going with Brazil's Amanda Hebos, and now it's time for the main event. You have Josh Emmett taking on Ilia Topuria. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. A giant main event coming up this weekend from Jacksonville, Florida. We have big-time featherweights. You have Josh Emmett coming off a title fight loss for the interim belt against Yair Rodrigues, who's going to be unifying the belt at this summer's big-time international fight week. And listen, I mean, Josh Emmett taking on the undefeated former Cage Warriors champ. It's 13-0, Ilia Topuria. He has one decision win, that over Youssef Zalal in the UFC, where he worked out his wrestling. But other than that, 12 big-time finishes for Topuria. As always, one half of your hosting duo, Craig Allen, Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP, with me to my left, to your right, respective socials, Matt Allen FNP. And I know we're really amped up for this fight because Fight Night Picks fans are Josh Emmett fans. Fight Night Picks fans are Topuria fans, and maybe they weren't necessarily sold when Topuria fought Josh Emmett. Or sorry, when Topuria fought Bryce Mitchell. And the first round was pretty close in that fight, but in the second round, it was not close whatsoever. Topuria going down to the mat, as Joe Rogan saying, I don't think he should go down to the mat.
Well, he hurt him a lot before that, though, to be fair.
Still.
But still, there's also a famous quote, hit a black belt in the head, they turn into a brown belt, and then just keep on doing it, and they go down in levels. Well, he hurt Bryce Mitchell very badly up until that.
Big right hand, drop Bryce Mitchell. Topuria goes down to the mat, gets a submission win, and he is a black belt in his own right. Now, Topuria is one of those interesting fighters that has great jiu-jitsu to go along with really good wrestling, great offensive wrestling. You saw that on the build-up into the UFC with Brave, with, I already mentioned it, Cage Warriors, where he missed weight trying to win the bantamweight belt, still got the win there. You look at a guy like Josh Emmett, collegiate wrestling in his back pocket, and that's what got him to the dance, but you know him for his hands. You know him for that big overhand right against Michael Johnson. You know him for the fight against Shane Burgos. That was a big-time bonus win for him. And for Emmett, once he gets going with his hands, first round against Dan Ige, giant overhand right. Now, that Josh Emmett fight against Dan Ige, people forget the second round where Dan Ige lands a three-punch combo that rocks Josh Emmett, and then it gets closer as it goes on. People are going to forget that in the first round, Bryce Mitchell rocked Ilia Topuria with a three-strike combo because he was able to land a kick in that one as well. Topuria is not unhittable. You've seen him rocked.
Shai Herbert almost knocked his head into the crowd.
You've seen him rocked and just absolutely ate a head kick unfazed. Well, he was phased.
He was pretty phased.
He didn't block it whatsoever. He rallies back. He knocks out Shai Herbert with a big-time right hand. The big thing to say in this one is neither guy's a slouch in the wrestling. Both guys carry power. Ilia Topuria, finally an opportunity at a 5-round atmosphere of a main event in the UFC. This should be a great fight. And I know Josh Emmett is 38 years old, coming off a loss, but this could be another one of those cannoneer moments like we had last week in the co-main event.
It could be, y'all must have forgot, but I do think it's fair to say that at this stage of Josh Emmett's career, with his wrestling at least, it is much more of a defensive asset for him than an offensive one. He is going to be able to defend the majority of takedown attempts from a lot of guys in this division, and I know this fight might not happen for rankings purposes. If he wins this weekend, maybe it will. I do think Emmett versus Volkanovski is an interesting stylistic matchup. Just from this point, what is Volkanovski so good at? If you wrestle, he's such a good striker. If you're a really good striker, he can take you down. Emmett does have the kind of wrestling defense that I think would force Volkanovski to just be a striker. Not that he couldn't get the win done, but Emmett does just have a very interesting skill set. We saw glimpses of that even in the Yair fight. He was able to hurt Yair with a couple big shots over the top, but I do think we are starting to see the limitations of what Josh Emmett's whole skill set is when he fights the top tier levels of competition, because he does have great boxing. But even go back to the fight that he won against Michael Johnson. I know he won that fight, but he was losing a lot of the moments leading up until he got that crazy wild knockout win. And Emmett, to his credit, does carry his power as late as anybody as you will see in the UFC, really. Like, he is kind of a heavyweight fighter.
He is a Jairzinho Rosenstruik.
He is. Josh Emmett has, I would say pound for pound, he is one of the hardest hitters in the UFC, and I feel very comfortable in saying that. But I do think the lack of insane volume, he has good volume, but really kind of 1%er power punchers or volume punchers, they can get off to a lead. And if he's not able to land that one big power shot in this fight, what's he going to do to go out there and win rounds? Because for Topuria, he reminds me a little bit of like a Jamall. Like, he is so highlight reel worthy that you do get caught up in a lot of the highlight reels, the left hook to the body, the overhand rights that you bring up rightfully so. He has been caught in some fights, so I could see a world where he goes in there, he hurts Josh Emmett, can go in for the finish, and Emmett hurts him with a big hand. I just think this fight's so volatile because both guys have that 1% knockout power.
I'd say he's a little bit smarter than that. I'd say he's like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, under the radar, but lots of
Not
highlights
as highlight
too.
reel worthy though.
Matt, when you look at a matchup like this, I mean, for Topuria, like, where have you seen awesome volume out of him in his fights? Because he hasn't shown it.
No, I haven't. It's just Emmett's been a guy who goes in there and he's not going to go out there and wow you with his volume. He's going to wow you with his power more than anything. I just worry that for Emmett, more specifically out of these two, he doesn't use his wrestling offensively, so he's probably not going to be doing that to go out there and win rounds. He doesn't throw crazy volume. He has good combinations, but again, the combinations end with a power shot. That's why I bring it up. I just think for Emmett, outside of those big knockdown strikes, it's going to be tough for him to go in there and just do things that resonate in the minds of the judges, because like you bring up, he lands those big shots against Dan Ige, but a lot of the other moments of the fight are some of those 50-50, and that's why I think the big shot will be so important.
And Emmett has had 5-round experience inside of the UFC. You saw it when he took on one big-time fighter, and we're talking about it. I mean, Yair Rodrigues. He wasn't able to get it done in that matchup his last time out. He did fight Jeremy Stephens way back when, got his eye caved in, had to take a long time off.
But he didn't drop Stephens early in that fight.
Yeah, that is true, and he did fight Calvin Kattar in a main event back last year, and in that one, a chintzy split decision win. A lot of people surprised that Emmett was able to get it done. However, if you look at it for a guy like Emmett at Team Alpha Male, a lot of people, like Danny Castillo is going to get you ready for a fight like this. He was able to land that big right hand on Michael Johnson too.
Song Yadong?
Song Yadong. If you look at it for a guy like Topuria training out of Killcliff, I don't know if Michael Chandler's there, but do you think Michael Chandler's in Vegas more than Conor McGregor is? Because it seems like it. It seems like it.
I want to see Michael Chandler fight Arman Tsarukyan.
But
gotta be honest.
Chandler, a guy out of Killcliff in the lower weight classes that can really get you ready for a stylistic matchup like a guy in Josh Emmett. Now, Matt, when we look at a fight like this, I'm kind of surprised. Topuria is pretty heavily favored in this fight. So we did throw it out to you guys, and we threw it out in our YouTube community tab. We do that every single week. You can find us over there throwing out the challenges. If we look, not a lot of votes, almost 80% going with Topuria. In the comments, the one and only saying rip Emmett and Gabriel Lopez. A lot of people sleeping on Emmett. I'm not even going to try and pick a winner because it could be as simple as who lands hard first. I've seen Emmett fight the best guys in the world. I haven't seen Topuria do that yet.
Thoughtful response right there.
So yeah, that response of the week right there. And we just threw that one out there not that long ago. Matt, this one is a tough one for me to pick because Topuria is low volume, good takedowns. Emmett, the percentages might not be there for great takedown defense, but he can excel in scrambles. I think he
doesn't get held down. That's the important thing.
He has good takedown defense, and I think Emmett can throw at a higher volume and make Topuria pay. I have a hard time with this pick, and I don't look at age as being a determining factor in this fight at all.
I do a bit just from this standpoint more. Maybe not the age, but Emmett's taken a lot of damage in his career. Like, he's been hurt a lot. And I do worry. Like, we brought up the injuries, or he brought up the injuries on this very channel against Jeremy Stephens. No, it was a long time ago.
And we also talked about Josh Emmett and his knee injuries.
And like, against Yair, he ate some massive shots, too. So I do think for Josh Emmett, it is fair to bring up the fact that he's 38. He's been in a lot of difficult fights. And for that reason, it's difficult to pick Topuria, especially when you have seen him get rocked by guys like Jai Herbert. I don't think Jai Herbert would have a very close fight with Josh Emmett. But I think Topuria's going to be able to do better with his long-range boxing. This is the difference between these two guys. Topuria throws his boxing combinations from a further distance away than a guy like Josh Emmett. Emmett will kind of do much more of a shell up and throw hooks to the body and whatnot, whereas Topuria will throw that left hook to the body from a longer distance away, and I think that's going to help him. Now, if he eats some crazy left hook counter from Josh Emmett, we've all seen it before. Josh Emmett could knock out a horse, but I do have Ilia Topuria in this
And it's
fight.
going to be interesting for Emmett. Again, he struggled with a lot of the kicks, a lot of the long-range weapons of guys like Yair Rodrigues, the speed as well. And he was able to implement the takedown only to end up getting submitted. I have Josh Emmett in this matchup as a big underdog because I think that Emmett is going to be able to carry it 5 rounds, make Topuria pay, and we'll see if that work rate for Topuria pays out because I've seen him slow from round 1 to round 2. Even if he's getting the finish in the second round as the fight goes on, I haven't seen Ilia Topuria fight in a big-time main event, 5-round atmosphere like this one. Fans in attendance, former MMA Masters guy, now out of Killcliff, is one.
You don't until you do, though.
But yeah, you don't until you do. So again, the big experience that he had over with Brave, the experience that he had over with Cage Warriors, that big-time main event slot against one, Brian Boulon, representing...
Beat him quick.
He beat him quick, although he missed the weight. Matt, we're split on the pick in this matchup. And I am sure that I'm going to get an earful like I did last weekend with the Cannoneer pick. But some big-time fights on this card. 14 total. Last week, 2 of them dropped out. It's another one of those ones where we get excited for it. We get a big-time showing from Zhalgas Zhumagulov. He's going to be taking on...
You look like Zhalgas if you got in with the wrong crowd. Like, you look like Tobey Maguire, Zhalgas Zhumagulov.
Zhumagulov taking on Joshua Van, the Fearless. Some big-time fights to look forward to. It's a card that's on ABC, the 5th card on ABC, the 6th one from Jacksonville. We have question mark kicks. That one's 2 hours before the prelims. What's the scoop on that one?
It gives us a chance to go back and basically change our mind over any of these fight picks that we've done. If a fighter misses weight, maybe we have an injury, and like you said, normally there's a fight that drops out during the week, so it just gives us another chance to go back throughout the card, and it's always fun to talk about fights with you guys.
You can hit up the super thanks here on this video if you want to tip the boys for the work. Matt, some big time fights on this card. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.